Okay, welcome everyone. And before we get started today with our regular meeting of council, I do just want to acknowledge that I think people in the community are aware, obviously there's been 3 smaller fires in the community today. So I wanted to just ask our CAO to provide an update on those fires.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, BC Wildfire has confirmed that they are under control and they don't believe the fires will spread anymore. Our fire department in Cherry Creek would be on call throughout the day today, but BC Wildfire did tell them that they weren't needed as their rapid response teams were on site right away and were attending to the fires. Yeah, and I think beyond that, the cause of the fires are being looked into, and we just ask people to have patience and not jump to any conclusions on how fires are started in the community. If anybody does see a fire within the city of Port Alberni, please call 911. Our fire department is always responding to any sites of fires of any type. And if it's outside of the community, you can call star 555 for BC Wildfire, or you can call 911 and they will redirect you in the proper process.
Thank you for that. And I just wanted to add as well that how quickly and diligently BC Wildfire did respond to the fires today. I saw them with a helicopter dropping down into the beaver ponds and putting that onto the fires where they were existing, and back and forth every couple of minutes for the better part of an hour. So I think we often hear that there's not enough early intervention of wildfires from BC Wildfire, and sometimes we're not close up to see. And today I definitely saw what did not seem to be that case. So yeah, thank you to BC Wildfire for getting on top of that right away. And since we haven't had a formal meeting of council since the Cameron Bluffs fire started, did just want to extend our thanks to BC Wildfire and all of the firefighters who were on the ground taking care of that fire for several days. We know that it was really challenging terrain, and know as well that there was an injury to a firefighter, luckily not serious, and we're told that person is recovering, but I think it really highlights the challenging work that was done and just how serious that can be, that we had a firefighter be injured during that work. Also to all of the people who got the highway back in order as quickly as possible, though it felt like a very long time, I think, given the damage that was done, and the fact that we have a highway open again, albeit single lane, is really incredible. So just want to extend our thanks to everyone. And lastly, extend our thanks to the regional district and city staff, as well as volunteers who did a fantastic job on the first day of the highway closure in opening up the Echo Center emergency reception area. I know that I saw stories online from people who were stuck in the community who worried they were going to have to sleep in their cars. A specific story of somebody who came to the community with a 1-year-old, was in Tofino, got stuck, all the hotels were full, really thought she was going to have to sleep overnight in her car with her baby, ended up finding Echo Center and just really posted about how welcome she felt and how community members came and dropped off meals and toys and you know, all of the essentials that they needed, and it just ended up being a really great experience for what obviously was a challenging time. So Port Alberni really comes together in situations like this, and although it was a difficult few weeks, I think we definitely saw the best in our community come out as well. So thank you to everyone for all the great work that was done. And Councillor Solda is reminding me as well to congratulate all of the graduates. We know that this week was graduation for ADSS, as well as 8th Avenue Learning Centre, and the college as well. So congratulations to all the graduates who are out there. Thank you. And we'll move into our council meeting now. So before we start, we will recognize and appreciate that we are meeting today on the unceded traditional territories of the Huipachesset and Sishat First Nations, and just really grateful to have the opportunity to be on these lands. We do have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items to add from councillors? Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. I just mentioned I'd like to address the topic of the lack of ambulance response service in our community and the resulting decrease in level of care for patients in our community. I was just wondering whether we could put that under new business or simply under council reports, whatever your pleasure.
Great, we'll add that under new business, item 16. And did I see Councillor Solda as well?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to, under maybe new business, Rainbow Gardens, a report, what's happening with the report on the park.
Thank you. I'll add that as item number 17 for Rainbow Gardens. And Councillor Dame.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to make a notice of motion, if I could, regarding a letter of support for a second route out of town. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll add that as item 18 under new business. Any other items to add to the agenda? Seeing none, then, any late items from staff?
No, Madam Mayor.
Then would somebody like to move approval of our agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Mealy. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. We'll move on to adoption of minutes. Item number 1, we have minutes from the special meeting held at noon and the regular meeting held at 2 p.m. on June 12th, 2023 as presented. Move to adopt by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Any comments on the minutes? Seeing none, on the motion, all in favor? Carried. We have no delegations today and no unfinished business, so we'll move on to staff reports. Item number 1 is accounts. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated June 26, 2023 be received, and checks numbered 152931 to 152006, inclusive, in payment of accounts totaling $710,522.57 be approved.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And bylaws, item number 1, we have reserve fund establishment. Bylaw number 5086, 2023. Rosalind.
So at the last committee of a whole, I did present to you the establishment reserve bylaw, and that went over the proposed reserves for the council to consider. A part of that was essentially the reserves that we had established in the past, historically, and also there were some new proposed reserves as well. And the new proposed reserves are essentially just for council to align their strategic priorities with the reserve funds. So with the consolidation, it means all the reserves will be consolidated into the one bylaw to be brought forth. So right now, council does have the opportunity to either discuss the new proposed reserves or to go ahead with the proposed reserve consolidated bylaw.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, not necessarily to staff, but I think you just need to go over it. A lot of us talk about the aquatic center and money that should have been put in from our community forest. So I do see Parks and Recreation Capital Reserve established 2006. 100% of log sales collected from parks added to this reserve. So I'm thinking to myself back then, if that was probably the intention at the time was to have log sales. Maybe it doesn't say from the community forest, but just because I do remember that conversation in 2006 and moving forward and how the aquatic center. So I believe if I'm reading this correctly, and thank you for the report, Ms. McCauley, I do appreciate this because I believe that was the intent back then, was log sales collected from parks add the reserve, or just log sales in general, which would come from the community forest. So I think that's where that discussion was. I'm still in favor of an aquatic center replacement reserve and setting money aside for that anyways. I just think it was just key to note with this report to say that's probably where that thought was coming from. And it's, 16, 17 years later, but here we are, so.
I just wanted to add that we have asked that question before about the log sales piece specifically, and there are On occasion, if there's a city property that is cleared in some capacity, there are log sales, and so that is actually where it came from. This was prior to the community forest being established. However, I think that we could absolutely, we might want to look at changing our community forest bylaws to reflect how we would like to use the community forest dividends going forward. And we know that I think last year we got $300,000. We know that we have another dividend coming in the near future, and it could certainly be, it doesn't have to be a part of this conversation, but could be a discussion to bring forward a notice of motion and possibly dedicate those to pool going forward as a consideration. Okay. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In regards to the aquatic center replacement reserve, I'm just trying to think of different scenarios that may come up in the future. For example, if we have put money in there in that reserve fund and it goes to referendum and the referendum is not approved by the public, so does council, would they have the authority to move the money from that fund to somewhere else, or is it always stuck in that reserve fund?
To Madam Mayor, to Councillor Haggard. So council has the ability to set this as an unrestricted reserve, which is proposed as right now. So if there came a time that we weren't necessarily going to do the pool, council could also direct those funds be moved into a different reserve at that time.
Thank you. Councillor Solta.
Madam Mayor, regarding the Aquatic Center Replacement Fund, I'm really happy with that one. And I have another idea afterwards, but the bylaw, the RCMP surplus reserve, is there any way, like, have we ever considered, I don't remember ever being considered taking the bylaw office and making it in its own payment instead of taking the money out of that reserve?
Yeah, that actually was how it was originally suggested to council, was to fund it, create a budget line for it. And it was our last council that opted to not do that, to draw it from the reserve instead, because we believed that that was proactive public safety rather than waiting for what could be reactive and using that for a major crime. However, that's fully a council decision. If we would like to take those funds or if we would like to create a budget line for that service, then we could do that rather than drawing it from the reserve.
So I believe it probably is too late this year, maybe let's put it on the next taxation year and let's have a discussion about it, Madam Mayor. So if we can pull that for next year, because I don't believe it should be coming out of that surplus. And originally it was for murder investigations and stuff like that. So I would really like to take another look at that at next tax time. And also while I'm here, we have a surplus of reserve. I think it's about 180,000 from last budget. Should I wait to make a motion? What I'd like to see with it? It's in there? Okay, I didn't read
you have a
that part.
notice of
Okay.
motion under new business, I
Super,
believe.
so this won't affect anything of our discussion. Okay, then I'll wait. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Douglas.
It's through the chair. Yeah, please, can you tell me how much the aquatic reserve would be populated by, how much financial balance when it's open?
I think that's open for discussion. Sorry, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Douglas. That's at council's discretion, and certainly staff can propose an annual contribution if that's what they would like to see.
Okay, yeah, I thought I saw a note here about 2% annually, but I was just wondering if we need to put an initial lump into that fund at this point, or if we're okay with just, establishing the fund and determining that later.
So today, I believe, is just the bylaws to create the funds. I would imagine, and Rosalind, you can let us know if process would be to create the fund and then further, once the fund is created, to determine what we'd like our contribution to it to be, whether that's ongoing or, okay. Rosalind, do you want to comment on time-wise?
You're correct, Madam Mayor. So the establishment of the reserves, you don't have to unnecessarily agree to the contribution amount right now. This is going to start your long-term planning process. So at budget season, we're going to come back with the reserves, and it's going to be a reserve discussion of what we need to set aside within the financial plan. So if you're not, doesn't want to be discussed right now, it doesn't have to be. It's great to partner that with your financial planning in the fall. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. Would anyone like to read the motion? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Move that Reserve Fund Establishment Bylaw number 5086/2023 be now introduced and read a first time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no additional comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I move that the Reserve Fund Establishment Bylaw number 5086/2023 be now read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried.
Madam Mayor, I move that the Reserve Fund Establishment Bylaw number 5086/2023 be read a third time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, carried. Thank you. Thank you, Rosalind. And item number 2, we have the Growing Communities Reserve Fund Bylaw number 5087/2023.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So quick and simple one, the Growing Communities Fund requires a separate reserve set up in order to track and report back to the province annually. So we do have 5 years to spend the funds, and this was left separate from the consolidated reserve bylaw that was just presented. So we're asking council to support the recommendation from staff.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that Growing Communities Reserve Fund Bylaw number 5087/2023 be now introduced and read a first time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments or questions on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the Growing Communities Reserve Fund Bylaw number 5087/2023 be read a second time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the Growing Communities Reserve Fund Bylaw number 5087/2023 be read a third time.
Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Dame. Seeing no comments or questions on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. Item number 3, we have zoning bylaw number 5074/2023, bylaw modernization.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So a new zoning bylaw is being proposed to address a variety of items, including accessory dwelling units, incorporating new legislation, and to provide clarity and interpretation on the application of the bylaw. The intent of the proposed bylaw 5074 is to replace our current zoning bylaw 4832. The proposed changes are limited in scope, although fairly significant in some ways, are intended to address some outstanding issues that have been identified by council and staff over recent years. And following the adoption of our new official community plan that they're working on, staff would undertake a full comprehensive review of the zoning bylaw with a full public process. Staff did bring a draft of this zoning bylaw to the January 31st Committee of the Whole meeting, and council supported engaging with the public on this draft bylaw, and that engagement has now been completed. Attached to this staff report is a summary table of all the proposed changes that we are considering in this new zoning bylaw. And I'm going to review some of the main changes, and then we'll be pleased to review in greater detail if council wishes, but I thought I'd hit the main items for council. Staff identified a number of permitted uses in our bylaw that didn't have definitions. And so we've added a number of new definitions to provide both clarity to staff and the public for certain type of uses, and also to align with recent legislation, provide updates to a number of definitions such as what a modern housing agreement is, and also new definitions of different types of affordable housing, as that is changed quite a bit. And also added a significant definition of accessory dwelling units, which has been a long time coming in the community, and so we're very pleased with that. Made some changes to our primary low-density residential zones. Our R1 zone, we changed about how we define density to a per unit hectare. We also added accessory dwelling units as permitted uses. In both our R2 and our R3 zones, we reduced minimum lot frontage and lot sizes and setbacks and increased lot coverage. And this is to really allow we have a significant number of historically created parcels. And these changes will make infill in these historically created parcels much easier without having to go through a whole rezoning process. And of course, we added accessory dwelling units as permitted uses in these residential zones as well. We are proposing to increase the height in our C7, which is our downtown core zone, from 14 meters to 16 meters. And this is really to account to some changes in our density bonusing regulations where there was the opportunity to increase the height by 4 meters, which has now been removed out of there. Staff will review this very specific about heights in our downtown cores once the official community plan is done in a much more comprehensive way. But we thought this was important to provide a little more flexibility in our downtown zone. Also, as I've spoken before, we've added a new definition of accessory dwelling units, and that is everything from some changes to our secondary suite regulations to allowing carriage houses and garden suites. The main change in our secondary suite regulation is to go from the required owner-occupier requirement to be a little more flexible where the principal dwelling unit must be permanently occupied by a renter or owner, so making it a little more flexible there. We've added 2 new accessory dwelling uses, one that we are calling a carriage house. And that is essentially if you have a ground floor garage or storage, you can have an accessory dwelling unit on the upper level, or a garden suite, which is essentially a ground level accessory dwelling units. And of course, as I indicated before, those will be permitted in the R1, R2, and R3 zones. Essentially, this zoning bylaw is used to help clarify the interpretation of the bylaw and addresses several topics that we've been talking about in this community for some time, including the main component of accessory dwelling units, which will lead to a greater housing diversity in the city of Port Alberni. That's the strong desire on that front. At its regular meeting of February 13th, Council did receive the Committee of the Whole recommendation, and staff then began to undertake some community consultation. In March of 2023, a project page was created and a public engagement website. The posting of the draft bylaw was put online. People were invited to participate in a survey. This was also advertised in the Alberni Valley News and also posted on our social media sites on multiple dates. The survey ran for about 10 days and we had about 40 responses. A summary report of that survey is attached for council's information. For the most part, all the changes were supported by participants. There was a fair bit of comment, mostly on our accessory dwelling unit regulations and some comments on shipping containers, but again, mostly in a positive way. Staff did make some minor additional edits to the draft zoning bylaw, and this new version was posted on Let's Connect Again on May 30th. And we've laid out a bit of a more detailed timeline in the staff report for council's information. So the next steps in this process is to essentially look to give first reading to this bylaw, which also would repeal the current zoning bylaw 4832. This requires a very formal process. That's what we're entering into now. If council supports, the proposed bylaw would have first reading, then second reading. We would set a public hearing date, have that public hearing. Again, if that is supported by council, council will consider third reading. It then is required to go to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to sign off, and then council can consider final adoption. Again, this will require the necessary public advertisement as required by the Local Government Act. And staff are seeking council's support or recommending council grant first reading to this bylaw. Staff would be pleased to answer any questions or go over this in more detail if council wishes.
Thank you for all the information. Are there questions? Councillor Douglas.
I'd like to make a motion if I could, and second for discussion. I'd like to make a motion that zoning bylaw number 5074-2023 be now introduced and read a first time.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Patola. Comments? Councillor Solda.
Yeah. Just a quick question on page 15 of the document, 49 of our page, 6.29 shipping containers. So there's a number of people in our community that uses shipping containers and when they're doing renovations in their homes. And so when they use them, they bring them in, they put it in their driveway. There is nothing there that states that they could do this on that 6.29. It's only for, it says new section added, regulation for shipping containers, placements limited to industrial zones unless used for storage during a construction. Well, I understand that part of it, but what about the people who need a place? I mean, you got to store your furniture or whatever you're renovating somewhere. And if you don't have a garage, it really sucks not to be able to put a container there for a month, 2 weeks. I'd just like some verification on that, if I'm right or wrong on that.
Thank you.
So
Director of Development
just for
Services.
clarification currently, our current zoning bylaw prohibits shipping containers completely. So they're not allowed now. What we're making provisions for, if there's a building permit, you could potentially, you can have a shipping container on during construction part of a building permit. Now, when people move, there's a number of businesses that you know, ship in a box and those kinds of things. We certainly, they're not a permitted use in the zoning bylaw because they're not meant to be a long-term solution. But for a short period of time, they're allowed on private property, or sometimes we will issue that they're allowed on a city street for a short period of time. And we have a permit to allow that sort of thing. So that can still occur.
Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Solda, did you have a
Yeah,
follow-up?
just a quick follow-up. So do you need a building? I don't know because I haven't done it. So if you're renovating your living room and part of your house, you still need to come to the city to get a building permit, just to clear that up. I know there's a lot of containers around this community in the yards, and I'm sure they don't have the authority to do that, but I don't know. So I'll let you talk on that.
What requires and doesn't require a building permit is, it can vary widely. I mean, anything structural absolutely requires a permit. If you're ripping out carpet and putting in new floors, that doesn't require a permit. So, you know, it really does depend on the circumstances. And so I guess what I'm saying is that these are some limited provisions to put some regulations in on shipping containers so that we have some measure of control about how they're used.
So one more follow-up on that one, then I'll rest. So if you're not doing anything structural to your building, you don't need a building permit. So if I want, I mean, you do need, okay, I'm really lost here.
I'm just going to stop you for a second.
Yes, go for it.
Because that's not what he said. So I think whether or not you need a building permit is pretty outside of this conversation. However, just for information, on the city's website, under building services, there is the number one frequently asked question is, do I need a building permit and what type of permit? So for anyone who is interested, that information is there. Very good information. So we don't want to confuse people by having you say, if you're not doing something
Thank you.
structural, you don't need a building permit.
I'm trying to do this thought process. So I'm not doing anything, I'm just redoing my kitchen. I want a shipping container to put all my crap in and my stuff in. Can I just come in and get a shipping container? Or can I have a shipping container in my yard so I can put all my stuff in so I can do renovations?
Currently not allowed, and this change only allows it under the circumstances that are noted in that section.
Thank you for that. Other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Douglas, you've already moved the motion. Okay, moved and seconded. Not seeing any additional questions on this. So on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you, Scott. And item number 4, we have OCP and zoning bylaw amendments for 2846 4th Avenue.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. For your consideration today is the development application at 28464 4th Avenue, OCP Amendment Bylaw 5078 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw 5079, and the applicant is Woodward's Village Incorporated. Pardon me for 1 second while I grab the remote for the slideshow. Okay. So just to quickly summarize the application that's before you, the intent is to enable a 4-unit townhouse development at the subject property, and the intent was to create opportunities for townhouse development in Port Alberni, and that's the intent behind the broader amendments that are being put forward. So the OCP Amendment Bylaw 5078 would change the land use from general commercial to multifamily residential, and would add this property to the multifamily development permit area in the OCP, and it would add new townhouse design guidelines under the multifamily development permit area. The zoning bylaw amendment 5078 would add that new TH1 townhouse multifamily zone that was designed for this application, and it would rezone the property from C7 core business to that TH1 townhouse multifamily zone. Here's a picture of the subject property, mid-block on 4th Avenue. It is next to a single detached dwelling to the south, you can see on the map. And in the OCP criteria, in the OCP policy, there's 3 criteria under 4.3.4 for council to consider in the redesignation of land as multifamily residential. And staff have evaluated these over the course of this application and are satisfied that this criteria has been met. And those applications, the multifamily lands need to be within walking distance of commercial parks and services. That 800 meters in this case specifically needs to be within proximity to major collector or arterial roadways. And the multifamily lands need to form an adequate transition between lower density housing and be compatible with adjacent land uses, which this application has met, largely due to the scale of the development that's being proposed. And with the zoning bylaw amendment, staff do support the rezoning of the property to multifamily because of the location does support that walkability in the uptown neighborhood. And the multifamily land use does create that favorable transition between the residential to the south and the commercial properties to the north. And overall, the density will benefit the businesses in the uptown neighborhood. And the TH1 zone in particular was designed to be compatible with single detached zoning, and that's where that land use transition is favorable. There's a picture, just as a reminder of the development. There's the 4 townhouses at the top and a proposed site plan at the bottom, which shows parking in the rear on the lane and a common walkway on the north side of the 4 units. So the public hearing was held on May 23rd, 2023, and residents did attend the public hearing, and their concerns included the housing tenure, rental versus owned. It included the privacy screening or fencing at the south property line, included concerns about parking, including the size of the spaces being provided, the access from the laneway, and then the use of the street for parking that may or may not occur. Their concerns included the height of the building and the style of the roof and how it may impact the height, as well as solid waste collection and how that would function on the property. So many of the issues that were raised by members of the public at the public hearing are items that we do address during the development permit review process and are already within the development guidelines for the multifamily zone. In particular, site access, parking, screening, forming character. Staff will be taking more detailed review of these during the development permit process if council adopts the zoning bylaw amendments. The applicant has also committed to installing more fencing at the south property line to enhance that screening between the neighbors. And with regards to the concern over parking stalls and laneway access that was brought up at the public hearing, the applicant will be required to submit a vehicle movement analysis where we actually assess whether the parking functions with the site. And then the applicant would need to revise their plans as needed. So in general, just to sum up, this application does meet the OCP policy for redesignation of lands as multifamily in the OCP. It aligns with the Uptown District Revitalization Strategy objectives for affordability and economic development. It also aligns with Council's strategic priorities for fostering complete community through infill vacant lots. And it aligns with provincial initiatives, in particular the Homes for People Action Plan with regard to providing more affordable housing. And it will provide additional missing middle housing in the community. So council's options are that the zoning bylaw amendment and the official community plan amendment be read for a 3rd time, finally adopted, and signed and numbered. or that council may defeat third reading and, may defeat third and final readings, which means the application does not proceed. Staff's recommendation is that OCP Amendment Bylaw 5078 be read a third time, that the zoning bylaw amendment 5079 be read a third time, and that the amending bylaws both be finally adopted and signed by the mayor and corporate officer and numbered. And thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would be happy to make these motions for discussion if I could. I move that Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw Number 5078-2023 be read a third time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dame, seconded by Councillor Douglas. Any comments? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just through you to our Manager of Planning, and I think it's your first meeting. Manager of Planning, congratulations. Just to note, we did have people here that night for the public hearing, and it looks like the concerns are going to be taken care of already. Talking about the fencing has already been committed. So I'm just really happy that we had that public hearing. We had the concerns from the local neighbors, and that the Manager of Planning, along with staff, it looks like they've addressed that, and we'll be going forward addressing those issues. So I just wanted to point that out, Madam Mayor.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay. Other comments? Seeing none. So motion is moved and seconded. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Councillor Dame, if you want to continue.
That zoning amendment bylaw number 5079-2023 be read a third time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dame, seconded by Councillor Douglas. Not seeing any comments. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed.
And I move that Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw Number 5078-2023 be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and corporate officer, and numbered 5078.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dame. Seconded by Councillor Mealy. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you.
And I move that zoning amendment bylaw number 5079-2023 be now finally adopted, signed by the mayor and corporate officer, and numbered 5079.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dame, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. On to correspondence for action, and we have two items today. Item number one is correspondence regarding the meeting request process for the meetings with provincial ministries, agencies, commissions, and corporations staff at the 2023 UBCM convention. Donna, did you want to start by just an overview on this?
Certainly, through the mayor. This is about the meeting requests for the UBCM convention in the fall, where mayor and council and our CAO are attending. What we did was we created a page of all the ministries that are in the booklet, and we bolded the ministries along with some topics that you've been passing to us as you were reading through the booklet. We just bring it forward today for discussion and to get it on record of what ministries you would like to attend. Typically, these appointments are with mayor, one councillor, and the CAO in attendance, and they are approximately 10 to 20 minutes in length.
Thank you. And is the deadline to, when is the deadline to, I'm sure that's in there, but to make our request?
Through the chair, it's June 30th.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't know if I'm going to the UBCM or not, but if council will go, I would appreciate if we could have a meeting with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. Much to do with, much is coming up later in the meeting, but I just thought it'd be appropriate right now to make that appointment.
Thank you very much. That is one of the ones that we've highlighted already, as had a little pre-meeting on this. So all of the bolded ones I've requested, or not requested, but requested that they were bolded as starting points. So thank you. That one, absolutely. We need to, if nothing else, we have met with Minister of Transportation every year at UBCM to discuss the Beaver Creek River Road intersection and Lower Johnson Road safety improvements. We've also used that for Banfield Road improvements. And absolutely this year, we need to not only talk about the Highway 4 improvements that are going to be continually looked at, but an alternative route. So thank you for that. Other comments? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I noticed that you have mental health and addictions already highlighted, but we need to continue to advocate for either stabilization beds or some kind of detox facility. I know we went there last year, it had the same conversation, but we need to keep that conversation ongoing.
Thank you. And I think we should add to that Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, and we can have a similar conversation at that meeting, which is the previous Minister of Mental Health and Addictions that we met with last year. Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Well, I like all the ones that are definitely highlighted. I think that's really important in this community. But I also would like to see education health brought in, especially at our university or college, and talk about training nurses, actually have RN programs in our community and see what we can do. That would probably, we have a shortage. Let's work on it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. Yeah, and I know we've probably got this flagged already, but just to re-emphasize BC Ambulance Service. I know in the past we were actually able to get private meetings at UBCM with the heads of the ambulance service specifically. So I'm wondering if under the auspices of Ministry of Health, we could request a meeting with the head of the service for increased coverage in terms of ambulances and increased training for the staff.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm just noting that last year we did meet with Island Health, their board chair and executive as well, and that's not on this list because it is just the ministries, but I think a meeting with Island Health is another one that was valuable last year for a few specific issues. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just going back to what Councillor Solda said, and it's not bolded, but post-secondary education and future skills, that would be the ministry to meet with. So bold that up.
Thank you. Anything else? There's a lot bolded on here, which is great. We don't always get all the meetings we ask for, but in the past, I think we actually have. We always say that, and then we do always get them all. We've done very well with them. So thank you for that. And I can work with staff on more of the specifics around those requests before we have to submit them as well. Donna, did you need any formal direction there, or is that conversation along with the items that are already bolded sufficient?
Through the mayor, I don't think any formal motion is required. Thank you.
If I could just add one more, I would just say the Minister of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship, just for a conversation around watershed protection. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that, everyone. Then we'll move on to item number 2 from the Alberni Pacific Railway, number 7, Steam Train Locomotive Festival. Would somebody like to provide an overview of this?
Through the chair, I can provide a high level. I know that our Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage was involved in having the discussions. What this is a new event that would like to have a festival down on the location where the Roundhouse is. I believe the intent is to pull one of the locomotion outside of the event, set it up, have Dog Mountain Brewing on site, and create an event to showcase the heritage down there. And again, staff just is in support of the event, just requiring a few boxes to be checked and make sure that we have all the information before this event does proceed.
Wonderful. And I have noted here, in addition to the requirements that are written, just as provided by yourself, that we would also want to require technical safety BC approval of locomotives to be moved, or sign off of that basically from Technical Safety BC. Is that right?
Correct. My understanding is before moving the train out on the tracks, we would need that verification.
Okay, so we could just add that in as Technical Safety BC approval. Okay. Councillor Patola, would you like to read this motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that Council support the number 7 Steam Locomotive Festival taking place on August 6, 2023 at Alberni Pacific Railway Roundhouse from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Subject to receipt of confirmation that a special event permit from the LCRB has been issued, submittal of a site plan to be approved of by the City of Port Alberni, traffic implementation plan, consultation with all affected businesses and residents, provision of standard liability insurance in the amount of $5 million minimum, and approval from Technical Safety, British Columbia.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mealy. Any comments? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to thank Mr. Spencer, the manager of the Alberni Pacific Railway, for coming up, and their group for coming up with this, thinking outside the box and putting on something that, well, hopefully will be an annual event.
Absolutely, and it might be an exciting tie-in with with train station improvements down there as well in the future. So absolutely agree. It's exciting to see. Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. No proclamations today, so we'll go to correspondence for information, and I'll just ask our corporate officer to highlight what we've received.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First piece of correspondence is from the Minister of Fisheries, Oceans, and the Canadian Coast Guard, which is a response to the city's letter of February 8th regarding the ghost gear. And then second, there's a letter and the city's response to an inquiry from Ms. Van Vegan regarding the public safety building. And then we have two pieces of correspondence that came in when the road was closed during the Cameron Buff fire, supporting an alternative highway route. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there items councillors would like to speak to? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to highlight the letter from Ms. Van Vegan with regards to the public safety building. And want to say that from my point of view, in any event, that was an unfortunate experience that they had there, and certainly is not my understanding of the intent of the public safety building. And I thank staff for the response that was provided to Ms. Van Vegan. I did want to highlight the letter simply because issues of public safety seem to be growing, and we are attacking them from many different angles at the moment. My concern is that we only attack it from the idea of enforcement, whereas I don't think that's very effective. And I think to establish public safety, we need to have a multi-pronged approach that includes many other programs other than just the public safety building existing as a place for policing to happen. It should be a place for all types of public safety to be encountered. And also that not only the public safety building, but that all doors are doors that are open to assist the public. So someone that has a safety issue should not be directed to only one spot, whether it be the public safety building or anywhere else, but that every spot that any citizen comes to is available to provide that kind of safety they see in the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and completely agree. And I'm just going to go to our CAO to maybe provide some additional information.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Patola, for the words there. Our corporate officer and the manager of safety, we are working on a program to try and get more of a collective impact approach to safety in our community. This is a multi-prong process, as you suggest, and also including all the different organizations in our community to make sure people and residents, businesses, everybody understand who they can call, where they can go in certain circumstances. So it is highlighted with administration, and we know this is a growing need in our community. So we'll be hopefully be able to have something back to council and out to public in short order.
Thank you very much. Any other items councillors would like to speak to? Okay. Then we will move on. Item number 1 from under report from in camera. We have a council releases for public consumption notice of its intent to lease Unit 16 to C. Dupas and G. Gortan for the operation of Grassroots Cafe at the Alberni Harbor Quay for a 5-year term. And item number 2, under release from in camera, we have the annual report 2022. So council releases for public consumption the draft 2022 annual municipal report as amended, and further direct staff to make the report available for public inspection as per legislative requirements. Moving on from report from in camera, those are just for information. We have council reports. Would anybody like to highlight any council activities? Councillor Douglas.
Just very briefly, I'd just like to mention that, and I apologize for not putting in writing just the recent AGM from Community Forest and how they've donated a further fairly significant amount to our community. And over on top of that, I really want to send out a thank you and appreciation to Mr. Gary Swan for all the years of service that he put in for that group.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think Gary has been on the board of directors since the Community Forest's inception. So yeah, really appreciate the work he has put into that, and he'll be missed there for sure. Okay, any other items from council reports? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. Item number 1 from the Director of Corporate Services, we have presentation of the annual report.
Thank you, through the mayor. You just heard a couple sections ago that we've released our annual report into the public, and under Section 94 of the charter, of course, we had to notify the public. We put it in the paper for 2 consecutive weeks and in all of our public notice places. We did not receive any feedback regarding the annual report, so council is in a position to endorse the annual report for the year ended December 31st, 2022 as presented.
Thank you. Okay, and questions and comments from council on the annual report? Seeing none, Councillor Mealy, would you like to read the motion?
Sure, Madam Mayor, I'd move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni endorse the annual report for the year ended December 31st, 2022 as presented.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Item number 2 under new business is the statement of financial information. So we'll go to our Director of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So annually, the City of Port Alberni must have the statement of financial information presented by June 30th of each year. This is a statutory requirement. Noting the report in the agenda will have to be resorted for the expenses to the vendors. So when I sorted the reports, I didn't go and sort it by alphabetical order. So that's one minor change that would be presented on the statement when it's posted online. But other than that, the statement is there for council's approval.
Thank you very much. Are there questions or comments on the report? Okay, Councillor Haggard, would you like to read the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that council approve the statements and schedules included in the Statement of Financial Information for 2022 prepared to comply with the Financial Information Act as outlined in the report from the Director of Finance dated June 14th, 2023.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Haggard, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And item number 3, we have the BC Transit Annual Operating Agreement for 2023-2024 amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the annual operating agreement with BC Transit is proposed to be amended based on a change for our electronic fee system. So BC Transit is now moving away from the monthly passes to electronic fees, and that would occur probably in September of this year. But what that does is now, instead of a monthly pass, it's a 30-day pass. So if you are consistently purchasing a monthly pass, there's a slight increase if you had that pass at the start of the month. This is more reflective now of the use. So if you do start 5 days in, you still have that pass that would go through for 30 days essentially. So there's a minor change, and that has to be changed in the agreement. But other than that, the paper tickets will still remain, so that function will not be taken away. This is just to allow for that change in the operating agreement for the fees and services. And as time moves on, we will evaluate the paper ticket system, and if it's needed moving forward, or if we can transition to full electronic payment methods.
Thank you very much. Are there questions or comments on this? Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. Through the chair to Andrew. This motion is strictly just to do with that changeover though from the monthly to the 30-day, is that correct?
Madam Mayor, yes, that is correct. So Councillor Douglas, the only change is that fee structure. Other than that, everything remains the same with the annual operating agreement.
To follow up, outside of the, this particular motion, but I'm just wondering when the last time we had a representative from Transit here to discuss their, you know, their routes and their times and schedules and all that. I wonder if we can have that brought forward at some point to have a discussion about our transit use, because I hear from numerous people in the community that it's very, extremely awkward, you know, I mean, I'm sure we all came in here in our vehicles, right? So I just wanted to raise that if I could. Thank you.
Thank you. It has been a few years since we've had them in, so I think it'd be great to invite them and start a conversation about possible improvements to our service. I know I've certainly heard that a lot as well, that it's difficult to use our transit system to really effectively commute in the community without a vehicle. I will just say that at the regional district, we do have pretty regular and ongoing conversations with transit and with transit about expanding service as well. So there's been a couple different pushes over the last few years. So we've had an ongoing discussion with transit there to do studies for expansion of service, but we haven't had that at the City of Port Alberni. So do we need a formal motion to invite them, or staff can take that and move forward? Wonderful. Okay. Not seeing any other comments. Councillor Douglas, would you like to read the motion?
I'd love to. Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute the amended BC Transit 2023-2024 annual operating agreement between the City of Port Alberni and British Columbia Transit to reflect the changes required for UMO, the electronic fare collection system.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Douglas, seconded by Councillor Patola. Not seeing any comments on the motion. All in favor? Carried, none opposed. And item number 4, we have the Kitsuxis Dyke Financial Plan Amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So with this request to council, we're looking to amend the financial plan for 2023-2027 to reflect the use of funds from the Canada Community Building Fund to repair and renew the Kitsuxis Dyke service. So this is brought forward to council to consider. This has a non-impact on the taxation. This is coming from the annual gas tax. What we termed it before is that fund. So, and this will be supporting the utilization of these funds by the March 2024 due date for this portion of that grant fund.
Thank you very much. Comments? Councillor Soldo, would you like to read this one?
With excitement, Madam Mayor, I'll move that the council amend the City of Port Alberni 2023-2027 financial plan, bylaw number 5075-2023, by allocating $55,000 from the Canada Community Building Fund to repair, resurface, and renew sections of the Kitsuxis Dyke walkway.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Soldo, seconded by Councillor Douglas. Not seeing any comments. Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through the chair, I was wondering if I assume inevitably there would be some removal of trees in this process as the walkway is being damaged. Maybe not. I'm just wondering if do we have any sort of policy for like a tree out, a tree in kind of thing? Like, do we replace trees? Could we? There are stretches of that pathway that could use more trees, especially along Beaver Creek, and I'm just curious if there's any sort of policy there.
1 tree out, 5 trees in, because we're planting new trees for sure. Mike.
Thank you, and through the chair. So on this repair on the dike, as we are replacing and cutting into to do the repairs, if we come across tree roots, we do analyze them. If they are over a certain size that may affect the tree's health, we do get a professional to say what we should do in that case. We do have an annual budget for tree replacement. So if we did remove a tree that was in a key location, we would upgrade it. Otherwise, we leave it up to the Parks Department to decide where we spend and allocate that budget within the community. So I know that there are several projects ongoing right now where we have been upgrading sidewalks and doing some work there where some trees have had to be removed. When we remove those trees, that's what we're using the budget currently to do, is make sure those trees are replaced and not just a small tree, a tree of size, so we can have some immediate benefit from it. But I do understand that council's wishes to have more trees, and staff is aware of that, and we try to minimize the disruption to our urban forest.
If I could just clarify, you talked about a tree replacement budget. So if a tree is removed, one is replaced with the budget that exists. Is that separate from the new tree budget? Because we have a $75,000 budget that was specifically put in place as a strategic initiative to increase the number of trees we have in our community, not to replace existing ones when they're removed.
Yeah, sorry, I should have clarified. If a project that wasn't meant to remove trees, then we would replace out of that budget. So currently, we did have to remove some, I believe on Elizabeth, and with removing some of those trees, we are using actually that budget, as Elizabeth wasn't considered a capital project, but just operating budget, and we don't have an operating line just to replace damaged trees currently. So in capital budgets, we would allocate for trees if we were intending on them to be removed. But sorry about that. I should have clarified that.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? Okay, but at this point in time, there's no indicated trees that need to be replaced as a part of that project.
Correct. There is no trees. There is a couple roots. We aren't sure the size, and that's where what we've done is said to the contractor, I forget the exact size of the root, but if the root is a certain size, then it may affect the tree. So then we want to take a look at it and see if there's other mitigating factors we can do besides cut that root off.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, the motion is moved and seconded. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. Item number 5, we have boundary extension on Johnston Road.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So this report is to consider next steps in the process for Council to consider a request to incorporate 7 properties within the City of Port Alberni. The property owners at 4935 Broughton Street, 3386 and 3376 Johnson Road have made a formal request to have a boundary extension into the city. And then 4 adjacent properties have expressed preliminary interest in potentially becoming part of the city. These properties are shown on a map that's attached to this staff report, but they're essentially at the eastern end of the city, at the corner of Johnson Road and Broughton Street area. The next step in a boundary extension process would be for the City of Port Alberni to prepare a boundary extension proposal that has to be submitted to the province. As part of putting that, and a significant component of putting that together, it would involve engagement on this boundary extension proposal with First Nations, the ACRD Regional District, Cherry Creek Improvement District, the property owners and tenants, and of any other affected properties. In any boundary extension, the city really needs to look at the full costs and effects on the city taxpayers before moving forward on such an item. This certainly would include the cost of sewer and water capacity and asset renewal understanding, so that the city does have the council has a full understanding and can make an informed decision on whether these lands should be, a proposal to the province should be made to incorporate these lands into the city. The properties in this proposed extension area certainly, or some of them, do have potential for extension of municipal services and redevelopment opportunity. And although the cost to extend municipal services for any redevelopment would be the property owner's responsibility, the city would assume the long-term responsibility for this infrastructure. Cherry Creek Improvement District currently provides water and fire service to these properties, and so certainly if a boundary extension were to proceed, we'd have to have discussions with the improvement districts about a change in water service. With the current staffing commitments, the completion of this engagement work and the preparation of a boundary extension proposal would take a significant amount of time. In order to move a boundary extension, this process forward in a timely manner, staff requested a proposal from a firm that could assist with this work. And there's a cost estimate attached to this staff report with an upset cost of $50,000 to do the preliminary work so that council could make an informed decision on this and do the engagement with as we've laid out. A boundary extension has a number of implications, such as future land use infrastructure and taxation, and the provision of services to this boundary extension area. Funding for the consultant service, if council wished to go there, would come from water and sewer infrastructure reserves, and then some from our contingency. And I would be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Scott. I'm just a little bit concerned that if you have a formal request from someone to join the city, why are the taxpayers paying for that consultant? Should it not be the person applying for the request paying for that service?
That is certainly something that council could require of these proponents. 4 of the properties have just expressed preliminary interest, and significant engagement would be required with them. 3 of the properties have made a formal request. They have done some preliminary work on what it would cost to extend services just to themselves, but not the wider look of implications on our wider infrastructure. And of course, although we could ask them, it is the city's responsibility to engage with the ACRD, the Improvement District, and First Nations, right? Although we could ask them to fund that, we would need to be undertaking that work, or someone working for the city to undertake that work, not the property owners who are wishing to come. So although council could say they need to bear that cost if they wish to move forward, that is certainly an option that we could, if council wished, go back to those property owners, and then we'd have to see, are they prepared to do that, and what percentage would they be prepared to share?
Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to the director. Could you tell us when that formal request was dated from the 4 properties?
So there's been 3 that have made a formal request. The 2 properties, 3376 and 3386, were the first 2 properties to ask for a boundary extension. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to pull the exact date. It has been some time. And then as that process proceeded, the 4985 Broughton Street, the mobile home park, also asked to come in. The city had already done some work with the province. With the first 2 properties, the province said, before you go forward, please engage. We don't want to do one-offs here, one-offs there. Let's look at this in a larger manner. So that's kind of where then, and in camera meetings when council was considering this, some direction was given in a preliminary way. Now this is coming out to a public meeting to take this next step, which is an engagement process.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to the director again. When you say it's been quite some time, are we talking hours, days, weeks, months, years, decades?
Several years.
So if you could be more specific?
Some of it was
we don't remember exactly, we don't have the exact date, and so I think we shouldn't speculate. We could get the exact date if needed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not asking, through you to the director, I'm not asking for the exact date, but several years is an approximation, a wild approximation that could be anywhere from 3 to 15. Are we talking 5 years, 10 years? Approximately how long has this been sitting there?
To the best of my memory, the first 2 properties were approximately 4 years ago. And then the third one was actually came to the city when I was not working for the city, but I think maybe 2 years ago.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And so that then forms the basis of the next question is, has there been any recent follow-up with the property owners of those properties to see if they are still making this request?
Certainly, the property owners of the mobile home park have been following up quite a number of times as they were expecting this report to come before council. And the property owners representative of the 2 property owners on Johnson Road are also of interest and aware that this report was coming to council. The 4 property owners that have expressed preliminary interest, we haven't re-engaged with them, but it would have been last year that they would have expressed that interest.
And Madam Mayor, could the director please tell us what the purpose of the request for the boundary extension is.
So on the two, I'd say on the properties fronting Johnson Road was for development purposes, for potential redevelopment purposes. For the mobile home park, they have, and again, I don't want to speak for them, but our understanding is their septic system is need of work, and their preference would be to connect into the city's sanitary sewer system.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, to the director. What is it that prevents the city from simply providing that sanitary sewer service to that property?
Historically, and this is council's decision, the city has not extended services, especially sanitary sewer, to properties outside of the city boundary because it would enable development and there would be no direct control over what that development would look like and no receipt of taxation.
So the development would be occurring outside the city, so I would presume the city has no desire to control it. What prevents us from simply providing that service, apart from historically not wanting to provide a service?
Again, a council discussion, and this would have a whole lot of other implications that staff would want to do research and provide information to council on. But essentially, if it came in, usually the city, if you're extending full municipal services, you would want a say on the type of development that's occurring on those lands and also to receive taxation on those improvements that are being done.
And I would just add that currently what's preventing us from doing that in this specific situation is council direction. So council directed to go this route rather than providing services or considering providing services only.
So I take it then that if somebody only wants septic sewer service, that it's within council's purview to say, we will provide septic sewer service at an appropriate rate, non-resident consumer rate to that property.
We would probably need to look at our sewer bylaws, and I think staff would certainly want to put a report together, but I think council could direct that, but there would be some implications that I think we would want to thoroughly explore and provide that information to council.
Thank you. Going to go to our CAO for additional information.
Yeah, thank you. So most places, if you're serving outside of your service area, you would have a buy-in cost to the service, which includes a portion for the overall functioning of your treatment system. And then you'd need a complex formula that any upgrades to the sewer treatment system or the infrastructure would be also taxed. So it wouldn't be just a simple formula. I'm not aware of too many that do that because of the different cost structure and the complications in trying to make sure that that development is adequately paying for the part of the sewer system and the distribution system and treatment facilities ongoing. But again, as the Director of Corporate Services has stated, we'd have to do some more research on that and bring it back in a report.
If you could just comment, Mike, as well on capacity limitations, because I think that would be, I mean, you're not suggesting at this point that we do that, but that would be a potential real concern.
Yeah, through the chair, there is some capacity concerns on our force main down on River Road. It is nearing capacity, and we don't want to make any of our combined sewer overflows act more on a regular basis, so we'd have to keep that in mind. So as we add to our sewer system, we have to be cognizant of the amount of space on our force main that feeds into our treatment plant and the cost to upgrade that or put in other chambers that would operate at different times. Again, part of that would be working with an engineering firm to look at other possible solutions besides replacing the full force main. But in that area, it is a known weakness of the city, and we have to be very cognizant before we add any more sewer into that area.
And this report that's currently would be completed if this request is passed, would take that into consideration.
Correct. What we had looked at as staff is not just what one of the landowners would have to do for a study of their current use. What we would say is the high and best use that it could be if it was brought into the city. What is the possible development that could be there? So what is the maximum sewer that would be coming off the site, and how would that affect our sewer, water, storm systems in that event? So we're looking at the worst case scenario. So then we would understand that if there was a developer at a later date that came in, we'd appropriately know how much to charge them for the development that they would be doing.
Thank you. My apologies. Councillor Patola, back to your questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, as I understand it then, Madam Mayor, to either the director or the CAO, we're going to have to expand or consider effect on the main, regardless of whether it's just a service extension or a full boundary extension. And so it seems to me what I'm hearing is the only thing that is preventing sticking a pipe in the ground is that it's a complicated financial formula. Is that correct?
Through the chair, really in council direction. And since council has never directed staff to look at offering services, such as we could do a main out to Sprout Lake and offer them our sewer systems and our water systems. We have never done that as a council. If council directed us to, we could look at that in any area. It just means that we'd have to look at our infrastructure and asset management in a different way moving forward, and we would have to make sure that we're realizing those expenses. So yeah, there is nothing except for council direction at this time, and taking a change in course, we'd have to make sure we think about all the possibilities, I guess.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And from my perspective, I would just love to reaffirm my own firmness on that council direction, which is that we don't allow residents of our community to pick and choose the services they want to pay for. If you are a resident of the city of Port Alberni, you pay for recreation, whether you use it or not. You pay for sewer, water. Also, that's a bad example because you don't pay for it if you don't have it because they're separate service fees. But you pay for all of the services, roads that you get in our community, whether you want them or not. And I've always felt personally very strongly that we should not sell our services to residents outside of our boundaries when they could come into the city and pay taxes for all of the services that we offer, just like our city residents have to. So while I do understand, and we have had some examples of really worthwhile requests where residents just outside city boundaries would like our services, a variety of different types of services, from fire to water to sewer. Council has held firm the last 3 councils that was not an option. And if you have the ability to come into the city, then you come into the city if you want our taxes or want our services, and you pay our taxes just like I have to or any of us have to for those services, whether we want all of them or not. So I think it's a complicated conversation and probably one that we could come back to outside of this specific situation if council would like to, but that's certainly always been my position because we don't allow our residents the opportunity to choose. I'm going to go to Councillor Douglas and then Councillor Patola.
Thank you. My concern, I mean, I think I concur with you about the thought of, giving or providing services to populations that are outside of our city limits. On the other hand, I really like the idea of us expanding our boundaries. And particularly in this area, it's a great area for generating tax revenue, as we know from all the businesses that are up in that neck of the woods, like the Walmarts and the Home Hardwares and all those folks. So they bring a lot of revenue into the community, and that's another potential for that. My only query is whether the proponents, and it's kind of was raised earlier, have any sort of skin in the game. Like, do we go ahead and spend this $50,000 and other, staff time, and then they say, well, we don't really want to join? I mean, what type of a commitment do we have from that end? And maybe there does need to be some sort of financial input on their part. That's really my only concern. I think it's a great idea, a great initiative to move forward. And even if they don't, we will recoup that cost with taxation revenue pretty quickly. But I was just curious about that aspect. Thanks.
Thank you. Good question.
So I can say as part of this process, engagement with the property owners and tenants and commitments to that is part of the putting a package together. And I can say that at least the mobile home park owners have spent money with an engineering firm looking at the feasibility, but primarily for what it would take to get their property connected into our sewer system. And yeah, so they have spent some money to this date, and yes, a commitment from the property owners would be part of the submission that would have to go to the province.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Patola, then Councillor Mealy, and Councillor Solda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate, Madam Mayor, your comments and adherence to policies that have been developed in the past. I don't share them, and speaking through you, Madam Mayor, to Council and everyone else who's here, I think that it's time to stop biting our nose to spite our face. It's a time that we need to stop segregation. We need for this valley to progress, for the city to progress, and all the other inhabitants around the city to progress, to stop our effective segregation of the city from the other partners that live in the community. We do provide services to people that do not pay city taxes. We provide them roads to drive on when they come to work in the city, when they live outside of the city. We provide recreation sources to them. We provide fire services outside of the city, which in return, we get fire services brought to us from outside of the city. We provide water to First Nations. We provide services to people that live outside the city. And simply saying that you can't have our services unless you pay our taxes is holding people over a barrel, holding them at gunpoint. This is not what builds a community. And we should use the term we, are the term a singular community. There are different heads of government within that community, and those different heads of government should all learn to get along. So when we say, we the city says, we're not going to give you any services, because you don't pay our taxes, that creates division, and that creates the popular myth that the city only wants to take over land to increase our taxes. Why does that myth come up? Because that's exactly what we have just said, word for word. We're only going to give you services unless you pay our taxes. And that's an expansionary policy that people that are not in the city right now object to. What we should be doing is utilizing the assets of the city for the benefit of the people that live in the city by having a full cost recovery and possibly profit source to the assets we have. If we can sell water and sell sewer and sell whatever else we have already and fully recover those costs, or even make a profit, or if not make a profit, build a better relationship so that the individuals that utilize our services realize the value of them and pay full dollar for them, as opposed to utilizing our parks where they don't pay any dollar for them, the whole community will be in a much better situation, both financially and, talking across the fence, neighborly. So it would be my motion that we direct staff to investigate the cost of simple service expansion to the properties that are requesting it, and have a report on that so we know what we're dealing with, instead of spending $50,000 and numerous staff time on negotiations with other levels of government and whatever professional fees are required to expand 7 more properties.
Thank you. Is that a motion?
Yes.
Could you clarify what it was?
The motion was that council direct staff to produce a report on the costs of expanding services as requested to these 7 properties, both for the expansion and the continued utilization of those services.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
I'll second for discussion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do you have comments?
I do, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much. So, okay, so first of all, I'd like to say that I agree with Madam Mayor and not to take away from anything from from Councilor Patola. I guess my question would be first to staff, if we change direction on this, how is this going to affect the property owners and the process moving forward? Is this going to be a major issue for them? And the reason why I say this, Madam Mayor, and I apologize, I'm well aware of the trailer park. My grandmother lived in there until she passed away, and the drainage and the septic issue has been ongoing for decades there. So I'm very certain that the reason why they want to come in is to fix those problems, especially, and if nobody really knows, it slants downwards towards John Street. So it's quite a bit of you go in and then you go down to the bottom of the property, and then that's where a lot of issues were on the back line. So I guess if we go forward with Councillor Patola's direction, a motion to investigate, a report on costs to just provide, how will this affect the property owners in the process that they're trying to go through today?
Thank you. Scott?
Well, I suspect in different ways. For instance, you point out the mobile home park, and they have a very select want, for their purposes to improve their septic and get into the sanitary sewer system. Where, again, I can't speak for the other property owners, but I think their main interest is coming into the city and having full services is for redevelopment purposes, for not as you see it today, but for something much more intense development on those properties. So I can't give you a direct answer about how they would think about this, because of course it's up to them, but I think they would have different reasons for wanting this boundary expansion and the full municipal services. And I should say, mostly it's the sanitary sewer, right? I mean, they have Cherry Creek water there already. Now, whether that's adequate for a full-blown redevelopment of some of these lands, I don't know. It really does depend on what they would be proposing. So I hope that partially answers your question.
Thank you. Councillor Solda?
Just a quick question to Mr. Smith. They asked us to join the city. We didn't ask them. Is that correct or not?
Correct.
So that's important to note. And also, Madam Mayor, you summed up the past councils going way back, how they felt. And when we talk about regional parks and rec, we would love the regional district to become one with us. And that's why they get charged a higher rate, and they don't actually in the long run. We pay for them coming in. So also with them coming in, this particular development, if they became part of the city, it's also a tax base for us too in the long run, if you look at it like that. Regional districts always say, hey, we want to be left alone, don't come and see us, because we will, then what about our sidewalks, what about our lights, et cetera? And we've never ever gone out and solicited them to join us, because we can't give them what they want, and this is how we've always let them come to us. And we don't want a piecemeal, we don't want just one house, why not all of them if you're going to get them? So that's how I look at it.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a follow up to that. So let's see how. Anyways, so I'm going to vote against the motion on the floor, Councilor Patola, with respect. I do support if we would like to take care of this on a separate item and take a look at that. But I believe, considering that the property owner has come to us with a specific request, I believe we should do that. I think back in meetings that we had with people from the Franklin River Road when they came in 2004 for fire protection, if I remember correctly. And it was just given it was given them the option. You can have fire protection, but it had to be part of the city. And even then it had to be, their properties had to be adjacent to city property. So even then, some of the properties couldn't be incorporated in the city of Port Alberni back then. So it's an ongoing issue. I do understand what Councilor Patola is saying. Yet we do give, absolutely, and the first thing that I thought was water. We give water to our neighbors, and that's something they should have. So, but I do understand that the proposal is a specific ask of the city. So I'd like to support that. But if Councilor Patola would like to go forward with a report for later on, then I'll take a look at it.
Thank you. Councillor Ducklet?
Thank you. Yeah, and likewise, like I'll be voting against this, but I appreciate Councillor Patola's, the idea behind this. So nothing wrong in particular with us selling our services. And if Councillor Patola wanted to frame this into a notice of motion that we could consider in more depth at a later date, I think there's some real value to it, but not in particular with this particular motion that we have that we're considering. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just add that our approach has been that we do not allow residents outside of the city of Port Alberni to pick and choose which services they would like to buy or pay for and which ones they would not. And that said, we can always consider a different approach. And I would go back to not very long ago where the city of Port Alberni did sell water services to Beaver Creek. So the approach has shifted over time. That was an agreement that was put in place to support the residents of Beaver Creek when they had a need, and they connected into our water service. Now, we sell them bulk water at a rate cheaper than we sell to our residents, and that is something that I certainly don't agree with. So I think Councillor Patola's motion in some ways is looking to correct issues like that, if I'm understanding correctly, to look at what is actual cost recovery and what is, if we are going to consider it at a future date selling services, how do we do that in a way that is equitable to city taxpayers as well? That said, I personally feel that you've identified a few issues that I fully agree with. Residents of the regional district do have access to several of our services right now, and they do not pay a cost for those. I think what I fail to see in your motion is how the motion would address that. So being open to selling services, if we sell one service, we're not going to then get funding in for parks or recreation, that type of thing. And I think there's a long-term strategy, and that we have been trying to respectfully work with the regional district through a number of issues to work toward a more equitable approach. I would say we have given a lot in that period, in a period of about a decade, to the regional district residents in trying to say, let's work together. We're not going to withhold things. Let's, we got rid of the regional resident higher rate at the pool, for instance. That was one effort to say we're all one valley. Yes, city residents pay the bulk of this service. However, everybody should get to use it for a price that is affordable. So I think that as a city, we have made several efforts to not be petty. And it has not gotten us to a point of the taxation gap between a city of Port Alberni home and a Beaver Creek or Cherry Creek home closing. So I think this is a long-term strategy that you're talking about. I don't support the motion that's put on the that you've made right now. However, a conversation for sure about what is the best approach to equalizing that in some way, because as we know, there's people, you could look up 100 examples for what taxation is right now, but I would venture to guess that it is thousands of dollars difference a year between a house in the city of Port Alberni and a house in Beaver Creek, for instance. And I know last time I looked it up was a couple of years ago, where an average home in Port Alberni was, maybe a $600,000 house in Port Alberni was $3,000 or $4,000 a year, and there were much nicer houses on property in Beaver Creek paying $1,400 a year. So a very significant gap. And if we continue to allow that gap to further, if we don't leave any reason for them to ever join the city of Port Alberni, but we continue to give our services so that they can expand, people will develop out there instead of in the city of Port Alberni. So not saying that this approach is correct and yours is wrong. I think in this situation, for sure, we proceed as we have, because we have been working on this for a long time, because it was a request. Definitely worth a conversation in the future, but I would personally have a really hard time telling a resident who lives next door here that they have to pay for all of the services, but we're going to let residents from outside of city limits opt in or opt out or pick and choose what they want to pay for, because I just have a hard time seeing how that's equitable for our taxpayers. Councillor Solda.
When I was on the regional district, all I heard from regional residents that we don't want to be part of the city. We don't want to pay for what you have. We're okay where we are, just leave us alone. And that's what all I heard. Maybe the ones that are closer to the city might have changed their mind and become part of the city, but that was their choice. We didn't go out and lobby for them.
Councillor Patola, did you have any comments?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I'm missing why it's all or nothing. It's simply a user pay system. We are currently providing a free user pay system, which is really what we should not be doing. But the system within the city is cost recovery. We don't charge our taxpayers more than the services cost. The city has a break-even budget. We don't make profits. We're not a corporation. So someone that lives outside the city and doesn't use all of those services should still be eligible to purchase those services. Now, to confabulate the current situation where for some reason previous administrations have decided to sell our services at less than their value is not what I am proposing. And what I am proposing is that all service users pay the appropriate cost of the consumption of their service. Ratepayers that are outside of taxation limits would likely pay a lot more. But to say that these individuals have said they want to join the city and pay city taxes might not be accurate. They may have proposed to join the city because they're in need of a city service, but were never offered the option of paying for that service without joining the city. And I really do question whether or not we're going to spend $50,000 on a preliminary report that will then set out further costs and staff time in consultations with both First Nations, with the province, with the regional district and the improvement district that may or may not come to any fruition whatsoever when for what I am going to imagine is a lower cost of just sticking a pipe in the ground and charging the appropriate amount for that pipe, given that it would be the appropriate size pipe, that might be an option that these residents would be more interested in. And in fact, I really do question whether or not the city will be able to expand its boundaries onto properties that just want to develop when the regional district would be probably much more excited about having a development on their property and getting the tax base from it. So in any event, I just think we should be playing fair with everyone and not proceeding down the most complicated road just because we've always done things as complicated as we could in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe this has gone to the regional district for some input. There has not been opposition from the regional district to date. I've got Councillor Mealy and then Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Great discussion, by the way. I love this. So just through you to Councillor Patola, and I'm just going to say this, I would assume it's mostly because of planning and a little bit of control. And the reason why I say that is this. So that's outside our boundary, and we'll take the Green Ridge mobile home park. So we can just give them the service and they can do what they want. So that the very next day they say, we're going to put in a water slide park. And all of a sudden it's a burden on our water supply, or even the court. And I'm just saying with respect, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but the two properties on the corner do a sandy dump system. We've just heard from our staff that the River Road main is at capacity or close to it. So all of a sudden, we're just adding that on, and we don't have the control for that. So that's my take on it. Whether I'm right or not is a different story, but at least that's how I see it, is that there has to be a certain, and I totally understand, to play fair with our neighbors, and I do, I love the fact that we're even talking about our neighbors and including our neighbors and trying to be one community. I like that. However, when it comes to our infrastructure, when it comes to the city taxpayers paying for that infrastructure, we need to plan it out properly. And so I just use that as an example of why we don't just sell it off. We have to have the control, and then we work from there.
Thank you. Great comments. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In regards to Councillor Patola's last statement about things being complicated, if you start letting residents in the regional district pick and choose what city services they would like to use, and yeah, we'll pay for it, but that would become an extremely complicated process for the planning department. Well, this street wants garbage pickup, this street wants water, this other street wants sewer. It would be complete chaos, and I won't support that motion at all.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
I'd like to call for the motion, if I may.
Thank you. Councillor Patola, last
Councillor
last
Patola
comment.
has the motion. You have a motion on the table, is that correct? Yeah, I'd like to call for that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to let Councillor Patola have the final comment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Mealy, I know that you are very well-versed in the notion of contracts, and I'm sure that you would never sell a brand-new vehicle to someone without defining in the contract what the terms are and what options that vehicle would come with. Because you certainly wouldn't sell a $50,000 F-150 and tolerate the client coming in and saying, well, where's the leather interior and where's the four-wheel drive and where's the trailer tow package? So obviously, in the real world where our administration operates, you would never hook up a service carte blanche and say, oh yeah, just go ahead and use whatever you need, the pipe's in the ground now. Every service being sold would be sold at a specific, with specific conditions on it, or at a specific capacity, which is essentially what we do now with developments. When developments happen inside the city, we state specific capacities they're allowed, because if their capacity is greater than the current mains, we have to upgrade the mains, and they pay for it, not the city. It would be the same with anybody else that consumes services. And with respect, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Haggard's comments, I am not suggesting that the city becomes a de facto service provider to every individual in the valley. I'm saying that we have the opportunity to provide services where it's appropriate, such as in this situation where the poor residents of the trailer park are without other options, to assist our neighbors. I'm not saying that if somebody phones up the city from the end of Summers Road and says, I'd like some garbage pickup, that we're in any way obliged to provide that service. But should they want to pay $10,000 a week for it, I think it'd be something the city should look at. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So the poor residents of the trailer park are not without options. They do have an option, and it is in our draft motions today, but your point is noted. So on Councillor Patola's motion, is everybody clear what it is? Okay. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion defeated. Thank you. Good discussion, everyone. Now I'm going to get Councillor Douglas to read the proposed motion or something else.
I'd like to make a motion that council authorize staff to engage Urban Systems to conduct phase 1 of the proposed boundary extension process for 3386, 3376, 3344, 3330, and 3310 Johnston Road, 4930 John Street, and 4935 Broughton Street, as reflected in the proposal dated May 19th, 2023.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Dame. Now, before we vote on this, although we've had lots of discussion, our discussion has been at a higher level about our philosophy on service providing and taxation. I think we've somewhat missed the conversation that really should have happened around this specific development and or potential development and boundary expansion. And Councillor Patola made a great point earlier, unrelated to his motion, but definitely related to this one. And that is, are we going to potentially spend up to $50,000 on a study that may completely scare away these 7 properties because it's completely outside of what they are thinking in terms of taxation? And that was my thought going into this as well, is if we are going to move forward with this, I believe that there is broad benefit to the city of Port Alberni, because these are likely reasonably developable lands. If we really think about, like Councillor Douglas said earlier, we're going to get these funds back in taxation if these properties are developed in the future. And even in their current state, the tax base would be reasonably significant to pay that back over a period of time. If these properties were developed, you know, and it was a multifamily commercial building, or you know, there's a hotel going across the street, if that hotel happened to be something similar on one of these properties fronting Johnston Road, the tax base created would be significant to City of Port Alberni residents to easily offset that $50,000 one-time cost. However, I'm concerned that we don't have enough assurance at this point to take on this cost from the 7 properties that they have an understanding of what the scope is to get their support following this work. So if it's going to be $1 million of cost, are these 7 properties going to get that number and back away? Have we had that conversation with them? And I know we don't have that cost yet, and that's what this report is for. However, what conversation have we had with them around scope of cost that they can reasonably expect to make sure it's worth our while to take on this $50,000 cost?
Thank you. Through the chair, it would be up to council if they wanted to pass those costs on. I believe a decision would have to be made. For administration, we just want to see what the costs are available. Scott may have more to add on to this, but for me, through the, we talk about master planning, we talk about the water sewer master plans and understanding our capacities and the development within the city. This is just something I think is good practice. On the exact costs and how this would transfer to the property owners, maybe Scott can speak to that more.
So I think I can say that the mobile home park owner has done their due diligence about what it would cost for them to connect to the sanitary sewer system. What hasn't been done is any downstream implications and what issues are there or aren't there and what costs that might be. And then on the other properties, you know, difficult to say because we foresee that they may wish to redevelop. And of course, that whatever that redevelopment would be very much would very much drive the cost of the connections. But they if they've done any level of planning or due diligence, they will have some idea. But I think the main uncertainty probably for both the city and any of these property owners is there downstream issues that need significant cost to be rectified. And so I could say that I don't believe that work has been done by either party, but I can tell you, I do believe the mobile home park, for instance, has a very good idea of what it would cost them to simply take their lands and connect it into the city's existing sanitary sewer system.
Thank you. And I guess if I'm thinking about it correctly right now, and if not, please let me know, we're talking about taking these lands in their current state, their current zoning. So yes, recognizing that some of the parcels along Johnston Road, the benefit to them is of, you know, changing zoning to highest and best use, putting something in that's higher density, then they're going to need increased capacity for that. This initial proposed study maybe would give them costs for that, but it wouldn't be required that those connections be increased or that downstream issues be dealt with. This would just, from my perspective, be about connecting in their current capacity if they chose to our existing services and what the costs would be for that.
Well, the study for a certain degree would look at downstream issues, and then that would be information for both council and these potential boundary owners so that we have a better, and then how that may, depending on what that is and how that might be dealt with, would then be a consideration of both council and those property owners if they still wish to go forward. Once we have some certainty about what that might look like and how, and what the council's direction would be on how is that being, how is council in agreement about how that would be dealt with and managed if these lands were to come in?
Thank you. So that could be, that's up to council's discretion at that point in time. Improvements to our existing infrastructure would not need to be made unless council directed it as a result of this. So there would be the opportunity if, say, the Johnson Road fronting properties said, yes, we want to prepare ourselves for a larger connection and rezone and start that process now, that could be negotiated at that point in time, but it wouldn't need to be. Council would have the discretion at that, when we get this information back, to negotiate.
Yeah, council will certainly have the discretion about whether they wish to move forward or under what conditions you may wish to move forward on. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Scott, I'm still concerned about the taxpayers paying this $50,000 cost. Is there any way that we could get them to front the $50,000 to do the work that needs to be done, and then somewhere down the road, if everyone proceeds, then they can maybe get the money back, or they get a cost recovery or something? I'm just trying to think outside the box and see what we can do here. I just don't want to spend the $50,000 and they go, oh no, sorry, we made a mistake, we're not going to do it.
Council could certainly direct staff to engage with the property owner, saying this cost has been identified in order to move this forward in a timely manner, and then we would have that discussion with them. About a cost recovery thing, that's more difficult. I'd have to put in my mind, I don't know what that would look like, but certainly council could say, look, staff have identified this need. We want you to help pay for it or pay for it. That's certainly at council to give direction to staff.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now the wind's been taken out of my sails by Councillor Haggard a little bit. So thinking outside the box, so two things first to go back to that. I would suggest that, and maybe it doesn't have to be necessarily on this property, but anybody that wants to become part of the city, there's a 20% deposit. So in this case, it'd be 10,000 out of the 50,000, if that's even legal, I'm not sure. But, and just saying that, if I can finish my thought, just that if they want to become part of the city, they pay a percentage as a deposit down. If they accept to come into the city afterwards, they get their deposit back. If they say, no, forget it, then at least that 20% has come to us, so we can recover some costs. So I'm on the same kind of wavelength of Councillor Haggard. And I waited for the other point would be just that this is a predominantly, or at least traditionally used to be, seniors home, mobile home park. I'm not sure within the last few years if they've let other families in there and that, but traditionally it's been seniors and fixed incomes in that area. So I am glad to see that the tenants will have an option to have their say as well, not just the property owner.
Thank you. Scott.
Just in some response to what Councillor Mealy has to say, the city doesn't currently have any policy guidelines on boundary expansions. It is staff's intent to put some sort of guidelines in a portion of our new official community plan, so that both any potential property owner who's looking at that and any future council that's looking at there, to put some parameters around how we should be looking at that. That's one of the challenges, I think, why this has taken a long time, is we don't currently have any policy guidance about how we should be considering them. When should we be considering these? What type of information must be submitted before council even considers it? So staff recognizes that we've got a gap there. So that's not helping us currently, but I do want to let you know, to your point, that is something we feel that is important to put forward for council to consider, so that we have better guidance when and if this other boundary expansions are being suggested or requested of the city.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Councillor Vitola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just following along that same line of questioning, and perhaps this might be a question for Director McGifford, who's still sitting in the body of the room, unfortunately for him, is I note that the implications are the funding for the $50,000 would be sourced from water and sewer infrastructure reserves, and then the operating contingency. So I question those sources of funds, why the water and sewer reserves have anything to do with boundary expansion, when boundary expansion is purely about taxation, services are subsequent to that, and how boundary expansion, in my mind, can only be thought as a capital expansion because we're acquiring land and properties, how that's part of an operating budget. So I really do question where that $50,000 is coming from, and if perhaps there's I'm not questioning the amount, but if there's some other more appropriate source, because what we're talking about is expansion of the city's limits, not providing services, apparently.
Andrew?
Madam Mayor, to Councillor Patola. So when we looked at the services that would be added, it would be from the 3 different main services, from general, from water and sewer. So the recommendation to council, and council can choose how to fund it, whatever which way they choose, was to do it in 33 1/3% for each one.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Okay, so council, we do have a motion currently to approve, basically conduct the work that is requested to be done. If a member of council wanted to propose either asking the applicants, combined applicants to cover that cost or to cost share, we would need an amendment to the motion that is moved and seconded right now. So I'll just give the opportunity if anyone would like to propose an amendment, and if not, I'll call the question on the motion as it's currently written and read.
Charles, are you going to do the amendment?
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to make an amendment. And I think it would go to 5B.
5B isn't read yet.
All right, well then there's really,
Maybe
the
we could
question of
just ask-
costing is 5B, so I'm
Yeah,
not
maybe
sure
we
what
could
amendment
ask
I would make to
Donna.
5A.
Donna, could you just let us know, I guess, where you think it would be more appropriate? I guess 5B does talk about where we're going to get the funds from. So if we were to approve 5A as it's written, which is to do the work, would it be sufficient to make a motion on how to pay for that work in the next motion? And my only thought on that is that some members of council may want to vote against it if we are paying for it and may support it. So how would we best handle that, Donna?
Through the mayor, that's a good question. Well, you could do it either way. Just one second.
I'm going to go to our Director of Development Services.
Well, I'm just reading a bit about what council was saying.
Yeah.
If council wishes to request the property owners to help fund this, I think you should be adding that it's subject to that request to the property owners to pick up that cost. Because I don't, if council's not wanting city taxpayers to do this work, you should be saying, okay, we're prepared. You shouldn't give us direction to do this work if it's subject to them, those property owners paying for it, if that's council's intent.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that helps a lot. So the amending motion to this one, which is to move the work forward, could be subject to either 100% of the cost or 50% of the cost being borne by the applicants. So I'll leave it now if somebody would like to make an amendment. Or Donna, did you have an additional comment to add?
Through the mayor, yeah, I was just going to say you probably amend motion A and you could scrap motion B if you needed to.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Mealy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for the discussion purposes. So what we have here is we have one big piece of property that has come to us and said, we want to be part of this. Okay, so I would say there's a 90% chance they would come forward with some money. The rest of the properties is kind of an I don't know. So I don't know if we can go to everybody and say, you're going to foot the 50, this is your portion of it. Because if it's subject to that, I guarantee you one piece of property is going to say, no, we're good with it. And then we've got to come back to it. So, and that's kind of why I was saying is maybe not on this one, but for the next one and talking about how it's done. But I have a hard time believing that we're going to go through all this. We're going to ask the property owners to foot the bill, and then one person's going to say no, and then we got to come back. So that's my only concern.
Thank you. I think that's a good comment. The only thing I would add is that the initial property that came forward was not the one big piece of property. So there was actually, there's 3 properties here who have made really intentional requests, and then there's 4 properties that have been included as a result of their proximity. So I think you're right. Those 4 properties may not want to participate in the cost at all, but then that's really important for us to know, because if they're not committed to the cost of funding the report, they're probably not going to be committed to the cost of actually moving forward with the tax inclusion. So Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would make a motion to amend 5A by adding the phrase after May 19th, 2023, comma, subject to the applicants funding 100% of the costs of the report on a pro rata basis as determined between the applicants.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda. Comments on the amendment? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, Scott. I know that Charles asked you if is it possible for people to put their cost in like a deposit and they move forward, get it refunded. Is that a possibility? Didn't really understand what your reply was. Because I would be in favor of that because they have to be committed. I don't want to spend the $50,000 and have them not move forward, if that makes sense.
I think what I'm understanding the question is if they were to then move forward with coming into city limits, that cost would be deducted from whatever infrastructure work ended up needing to be done. Yeah. So it's about commitment to the process.
Commitment to the process.
Thank you. Scott.
Well, I suspect we'd have to get some legal advice on what the legal ability to do something like that would be. And that would be something that council would have to be considered when you're making a final decision on submitting a boundary submission to the province to consider. So I can't give you a detailed answer because I really want to get some advice on the ability to do something like that. And then council could consider that prior to the formal submission going to the province.
Thank you. I have Councillor Mealy and then Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to go back to that, that's kind of why I said maybe it's not appropriate for this, because we have some people that want to move on with the process. And then we talked about how the process is already moving on our side of things. So I came up, I mean, that's just the idea, just as a commitment to make it happen. I'm not sure if adding that into this proposal is beneficial at this point. I think we should just move on with this proposal and then worry about how we structure it, which staff has already started for the next few proposals.
Thank you. Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There just seems to be a lot of uncertainty here for what is a fairly big deal. I'm just for discussion, I'm wondering if maybe this is something we want to postpone until the next meeting and give staff time to maybe get some information on some of these questions we have, or just a thought?
Absolutely. I think that if we did want to postpone it to the next meeting, we would just want to make a clear ask for information. So I haven't heard yet a lot of questions that can't be answered, with the exception of the possibility of being able to take this as a bond rather than, which we would definitely need to get information on. So if council would like to defer this to the next meeting, that's certainly possible. But I would say we just need more information on what information is being requested.
Thank you. You know, I have no problem with voting for this motion as it is originally. It's a good investment, right? We're getting new property owners into the community. It's a very highly commercial, viable space. No matter what the cost, we're going to recoup that cost. It's just going to be a matter of time. Do we get the cost back in the first year, the second year, the third, and then continue reaping those benefits of that revenue for forever? So, you know, I think there's some really good points that have been raised, though, from our discussions. And I think that we need to follow that up with, you know, looking at our policies and procedures. And Scott was mentioning, you know, how we don't really have that in place right now for further events where parts of the outside community, the regional district, want to come and join, and that we do have something for a commitment. But I have no issue with this at the moment as it stands, and don't feel it'd be appropriate to postpone it. But of course, that's a matter of council decision, and I don't feel it needs to be amended in any way whatsoever.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Okay, so currently we have a motion on the floor and an amendment moved and seconded. Any additional comments on the amendment? Councillor Haggard.
Can we just repeat what the amendment is, please?
Donna?
The amendment was a proposal dated May 19th, 2023. So following that, subject to the applicants paying 100% of the costs as prorated by the applicants.
100% of the cost with proration determined by the applicants.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly. Thank you, Councillor Patola. Okay, so on the amendment, all in favor? Opposed? Amendment carried. Thank you. And now on the motion as amended, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for great discussion. And at this point, we don't need... At this point, we don't need to make the motion for 5B as the amendment passed. So we'll move on from there to bylaw enforcement policy. And we've been over this. I'm not sure if there's any additional comments that need to come forward or more information. Donna, did you have information first before I go to questions?
Sure, through the chair. Yeah, this is just, well, no new information, but just to let you know that this bylaw enforcement policy is coming to council today to potentially be approved, following 2 committee of the whole meetings with some great discussion by council. I had made the changes to the policy to include the newly adopted corporate strategic plan and gave a little bit of background of the bylaw enforcement department. So I'll just hand it back over to you.
Thank you. I have a question first from Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend the last Cal meeting, but at the previous Cal meeting when this was first brought forward, I noted a number of concerns, and I just note those same concerns now because they haven't been addressed. The best practices, as stated by the Ombudsman, haven't been followed here. And one, although it's stated in the report that this is based on the best practices stated by the Ombudsman, one particular issue that I have is at 6.2, where the policy states that all complaints, that there will be no need to inspect all complaints, and that, sorry, I think 6.2 is, corporate officer, could we have 6.2 up there? It's just at the end of the report. I think Councillor Mealy has it right. Right. While all complaints will be received and logged, not all complaints will be investigated. Now, anonymous complaints will not be acted on. So I have a problem with that because the Ombudsman report gives the air that there should be prioritizing of certain things that shall be acted on, but that complaints should not be ignored or require an individual complainer to produce their information. Certainly it's a policy throughout law enforcement across North America that anonymous complaints are acted on and taken seriously. Then it's followed by the notion that vexatious complaints won't be acted on. And again, that was an issue that I took at the original Cal meeting, in that the definition of vexatious complaints relies upon a determination by the bylaw officer based on a set of facts that the bylaw officer does not have. So it's kind of a circuitous legal argument to say that I've determined this is vexatious without knowing anything about the complaint, and therefore I won't find out anything about the complaint. There, 6.5 is another item that this one speaks about. The city will not provide information to follow up on complaints, where the ombudsman report specifically states that all complainants should be provided with information in follow-up. So some of these best practices aren't being followed, which is a concern to me. I raised them before and they haven't been dealt with. The reference to the strategic plan, although useful, it's a permissive reference. It's not a directive reference. So there's nothing in the strategic plan that says we should have a bylaw policy such as this. The bylaw policy simply doesn't offend what's in the strategic plan. So we shouldn't make the mistake that it's being instructive. And finally, the reference in the report to developing a new position, the Manager of Community Safety and Social Development. I have some serious concerns about that this is just kind of being slid into the report, that we're creating a new service in the city of social development, which is certainly not within the city's purview, or it's a poor use of an Orwellian term to suggest that social development is some kind of bylaw enforcement, and that's how we're going to develop our society socially, by laws. We currently already have, in this community, a CAT team. We have a health network. We have outreach team conferences that are organized by the individual service providers. We have community advisory groups for shelters, the OPS site, and one organized by Island Health for the whole community together. I don't know why we need another position in the city to organize service providers or do social development when it's all already being done on multiple levels and funded on those multiple levels by senior government. So I wouldn't be supporting that part of it. And my lack of support isn't with regards to the notion that it's appropriate to give direction to our employees. That's absolutely appropriate. It's just some of this direction I raised issues or concerns about before, and in my absence at the last Cal meeting, I see that I don't feel that any of those concerns were specifically addressed, and thus I still have them. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Okay, Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. Yeah, I got to confess, I missed this part about we're hiring an additional staff member for bylaw.
Mike, are you able to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. We aren't hiring an additional person. Currently, the community safety manager does coordinate with the different groups. It just wasn't part of the title. They previously looked after coordinating with the RCMP as well. You know, in a collective impact process, the city coordinates and makes sure that everybody's aware of what's happening in the community. Currently, we aren't updated all the time on what's going on. Although some individual councillors are updated more than staff are, we don't always have what every group is actively doing in our community. And therefore, when we get questions, we can't facilitate those questions to the appropriate place. So by taking a collective impact approach, we'll have the numbers to provide to public. We'll be able to know what's going on in the community. And that's part of this shift in that role. Instead of looking after the liaison with the RCMP, they're just going to liaison with the groups, cause that collective impact process, so then we can provide that information to others. In no way is it trying to duplicate any services at all.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas.
Just to confirm, so our staffing level is the same in the bylaw department? Okay, thank you.
Yes, correct. Thank you. Councillor Douglas, would you like to read the motion?
I'd like to make a motion that council approve policy 3008-1, bylaw enforcement.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Douglas, seconded by Councillor Dame. Additional comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 7, sports fields. Who is presenting the overview of this one? Or this is just from the last committee of the whole meeting? Council, are there any questions, clarifying details from last meeting? Councillor Solda, would you like to read this motion?
I will, Madam Mayor. I'll move that the council direct staff to obtain preliminary costs for the recommended capital projects for city-owned sports fields for council consideration at a future regular meeting.
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Haggard. Comments? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and perhaps in the absence of the Director for Parks, the CAO could offer a comment on the phraseology in the report that council has changed their objectives or priorities and haven't maintained the fields. I'm wondering if there's any knowledge about when council decided to not maintain the fields.
Through the chair, I guess I can't speak on behalf of the reporter as I didn't write it, but again, there was no direction on that. There was no standard developed on how we maintain our fields, and I believe that's what it's referring to. And that's part of the master planning process to develop that standard that council can endorse, and then we have marching orders as staff and administration to make sure that something is kept to that standard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I wonder if the CAO could comment that whether or not the job description for the manager of Parks and Rec would include maintaining the assets of the city in some type of phraseology.
Correct.
And if, in fact, the need for work being done for the city fields is because they haven't been maintained, and maintenance is an operational budgetary item, why would we be looking at a capital expenditure now?
Through the chair, I believe that some of the fields have a operational life, just like most assets. And as they're played on for years and years, they do need to be replaced or items need to be upgraded. I don't believe those have been. I can't speak to why, but there is some need for some bigger repairs on the fields to correct some of the issues. As we go through the process and decide on a standard that we're doing, it might cause more repairs that are needed. I believe in the COW meeting, our director did comment that they would try not to, they would do the immediate repairs, so put in the budget for now before the repairs that are necessary to keep them in the fields in operational and come up with a plan through the master plan on which fields would be overhauled. So in that process, it would take, you couldn't put all the fields out of commission for a full year. You would rotate through and upgrade the different facilities. So where we would actually put in capital money in the near future, it would be in the fields that weren't going to be replaced currently, so we aren't ripping up the work that we're currently in now. I probably didn't put it as eloquent as she did, but I believe that was her response to that question in the meeting.
And I just wanted to confirm that in the previous years, we have always allocated operating budget to the maintenance of the fields?
Correct.
And so then my question becomes, and perhaps it's rhetorical, but if we've spent money to maintain the fields, and it's clearly within the general job description of the manager has authority to maintain the fields, why haven't the fields been maintained?
And there would be, through the chair, there's a variety of reasons for that. Some of it would be absentee in staff in the sense that we haven't had a consistent manager in parks for quite some time. But other ones are that staff have been directed to work on capital projects, other items to make sure they came on budget, then took them away from the operations and maintenance of the regular fields. And then there are other complicating factors within the last 4 years with the backfilling of staff when they're off on union business or vacations and not being able to maintain that. So I do understand that there has been some years where the full parks allocation for operations has not been allocated. So we are hoping to correct that in the future and make sure that we are maintaining the fields and making sure that the funds are spent so it doesn't build up to capital improvement.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just one follow-up question, and again, unfortunately, Director McGifford's still here. If we didn't spend the money that we put into the operating budget to maintain the fields because we didn't maintain the fields, what happened to that money?
I think I might be able to, through the chair, that would go into the operating reserves and then be allocated at a later date.
Into our surplus, just
Our
like
surplus, yeah.
has been presented this year, that we had a surplus of, I don't know, $600,000, $700,000, I can't remember, and about half of it was from Parks and Rec. I know we've discussed this at length, for sure.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I seem to recall that we took that money that was supposed to be for maintaining the fields and have reallocated it as a surplus to somewhere else.
Councillor Haggard, did you have a comment? I think you were next.
Yes, I was just going to add to the CAO's explanation is part of this capital projects is converting the sand-based fields to soil-based, or sorry, other way around, soil-based to sand-based. So that's hopefully will add to your question.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Okay, the first motion is moved and seconded. So on that motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And Councillor Solda, would you like to read the next one?
Madam Mayor, I move that the council direct staff to utilize a portion of the awarded Growing Communities Fund to complete the Parks, Recreation, and Heritage Master Plan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is resulting from the recommendation coming from the Committee of the Whole. There's no new information that is provided in the report. It's just getting council to confirm the recommendation from the committee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Move that, excuse me, I move that council direct staff to allocate growing communities funds in the amount of $5,269,000 as follows. 20% of the funding to address information gaps in populating long-term financial planning for community growth and the city's major assets, and 80% of the funding to set specific capital priorities based on the results of the long-term financial planning.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dame, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Item number 10, we have a draft letter from Sashot First Nation in support of an alternative access road, and we had a recommendation from the Committee of the Whole. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read that? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Haggard, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Comments? Councillor Patola. Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
So, thank you, there you go. So I don't think we're, yeah, well, sorry, I apologize, it does say contract Coulson Aviation, but I do believe that we need to be utilizing all supports such as Coulson Aviation as well. So I do understand Councillor Patola in saying we shouldn't be knocking on the door with one specific answer. However, I mean, they are our local answer, and I don't mind supporting that.
Thank you, and I just want to echo Councillor Patola's comments around the caution of supporting one business, or even as we discussed at our committee of the whole meeting, even pigeonholing ourselves to one alternative route as the solution. We are not the experts. We are the voices of the community, and certainly I think it's our role to bring forward what we hear in the community, but to not presume that that is necessarily the right option or the only one that should be explored. However, I did just want to share, I do think it's also a part of our responsibility to support local businesses that invest in our community and in our area, and in a capacity as well where there is an opportunity. And I did just want to share as well a story that came from somebody who was with BC Wildfire, and their feedback was that the Cameron Bluffs fire was spotted at 10 o'clock at night, and that the current technology of the company contracted by BC Wildfire is not able to fight forest fires overnight. And so the response was not until the morning with helicopters and that type of technology. And as we know, Coulson Aviation has night vision helicopter flying technology, and I think that they are the only company with that technology. So not even necessarily about using them instead of someone else. I think the letter is broad enough to say, look at all resources, and specifically, please take a look at Coulson's. But in this specific instance, I think we see, that fire grew significantly overnight, and that was feedback that came to me from someone who was on the ground supporting the work on that fire, who said, had it been spotted during the day or had we had the ability to fight it overnight, probably significantly less damage would have been done. So total speculation. We are not the experts. I think we do have to be very cautious, but what we hear from the community, I think it is our role to bring that forward to the province. I think this is a great way to do that. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When the council goes to UBCM and they speak with Minister Fleming, Mr. Farnworth, I think you can relay that message that we're trying to support a local business, but they are also very capable of taking care of us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. Yeah, I fully endorse this letter. I think it's a really good idea for us to sign on to it along with all of our partners. I do feel, however, that, and I think we did have some discussions at the COW earlier about sending our own letter. And I think the unfortunate part of this is it does muddy the waters a bit, like we're sending 2 or 3 messages in this letter. And our real message should be the fact that two large corporations not only control our access out into the forest, but now they control access in and out of our community, and that we need to have a secondary access route for the Alberni Valley from the east side of the island. So I'd really, very much in favor of this motion, but I think we need to consider, an initiative of our own as well, so that it's also received on top of this. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I have no doubt other communities would definitely support this letter too, and I'm talking across the province. I would also like to see a copy of the letter be sent to AVICC and UBCM because it would be fanned out to the membership, and I think it's important.
Thank you. Okay. Motion has been moved and seconded. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Item number 11 from the Committee of the Whole as well. We have a recommendation from Committee of the Whole in response to delegation presentation from Dr. Lambiot on recruitment and retention of medical staff. And we have the motion written there is that council consider the recommendation of a joint task force as it relates to the recruitment and retention of medical staff in the Alberni Valley. I would like to make that motion slightly differently and just say that council directs staff to work with regional district staff to determine who is best suited to lead a joint task force as it relates to the recruitment and retention of medical staff in the Alberni Valley. Okay, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Solda. That's okay. And any comments on that? Just my only kind of comment is that I do think that this is not something that should be specifically led by the city. We may have the resources to do it, the regional district may, or another partner, but I think it's the first step is that conversation to determine who has capacity, recognizing that it's a larger issue with many components, as I'm sure we'll hear about in some capacity in our question period today as well, that need to be explored. Okay, Councillor Patola.
I'd just like to say, Madam Mayor, thank you for that clarification and rewording. The motion makes a lot more sense to me now because I wasn't here during the cow and I wasn't sure what the joint task force would do, but that all makes perfect sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And item number 12 from the Community Action Team, council consideration of the delegation presentation and associated requests from the Community Action Team, from the Committee of the Whole, and council direction is requested. And I'm not sure what the specific requests were.
Through the chair, if council wants to direct us to do something, we can, or we can just receive it as information.
Yeah, so we already did that though. Yeah. So I think that, like, if I remember correctly, the requests were around continuing to advocate. Councillor Haggard?
I was just going to say, I did write a comment down here. I can't remember specifically what the asks were, but I would certainly encourage all members of council to attend the International Overdose Awareness Day event that's happening on August 31st that the Community Action Team is organizing. That was one of the asks. And the second ask is to continue to advocate for services in our community, which we've already committed to doing at UBCM.
Thank you. So I would say no motion needed there, unless somebody would like to make an additional one. Seeing none. Item number 13, 2022 surplus funds, notice of motion from, and this was deferred from the June 12th regular meeting. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I move that the council allocate the 2022 surplus between the RCMP and the Parks and Recreation Heritage Reserves and the Aquatic Center Replacement Reserve Fund. So divide it between three equal. And I believe, Madam Mayor,
hang on one second. Is there a second?
Oh.
Seconded by Councillor
Sorry.
Mealy. Continue.
I believe there's approximately 180,000. Maybe we can get clarification.
So, Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Solda, yes, there was $185,063 that was remaining from 2022's operating surplus.
Thank you. Okay. Any motion is moved and seconded? Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to clarify, because it wasn't the exact wording that was written down, but I knew that there would be a change, and just wanted to clarify that that is in three equal parts. Yes. Thank you.
Correct, in three equal parts. Okay, seeing no more comments on the motion, all in favor? None opposed, carried. Item number 14, we had a notice of motion, so, and this is Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On January 31st, 2023, adults in BC are not subject to criminal charges for the personal possession of small amounts of certain illegal drugs. This is a key strategy to reduce stigma and also address the toxic drug crisis. The purpose of this proposed bylaw is not to undermine drug decriminalization. However, we need to set an expectation on where those activities can happen. We need to be able to say that if you're going to use drugs, let's ensure that you have a safe place to do so for your benefit and also for the benefit of others. I want to create solutions that make good common sense. But I am concerned about normalizing the use of drugs for children and youth. There was a comment from a councillor last week at the Committee of the Whole meeting that a bylaw is being proposed for punishment. That was certainly not my intent at all. A ban on unregulated substances being consumed in certain areas would give enforcement officers the ability to point drug users towards necessary resources and a safer place to consume those drugs. I'm proposing that we create a nuisance bylaw to prohibit the consumption of controlled substances within 15 meters of any playground, sports field, tennis court, picnic shelter, water park, skate park, community center, library, swimming pool, and the museum, and/or any public spaces for and used by children and youth. I would also like to suggest that the bylaw department consult with the local community action team and our local medical health officer in order to balance the goals of public health and the needs of the community. And I know there's a lot of different messages being brought forward by the different ministries regarding this matter of what communities can do and what they can't do. And from my preliminary research, if you try to do more, that would contravene the provincial health order. But I think this is something that we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, and I neglected to ask you to read the motion, so if you would like to do that as well, that would be great.
I would like to move to direct staff to draft a bylaw that would prohibit use of illicit drugs in public spaces as per my instructions.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Mealy. Comments? I've got Councillor Solda and then Councillor Mealy.
So, Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Haggard, are you asking for the same kind of bylaw regarding like smoking? The smoking bylaw sounds so similar to this smoking.
For my research, other communities have tried to do that, and it was overturned by the local health authority. However, that doesn't say that we can't do research and look into it and speak to our medical health officer to see if that is allowed.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy and then Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Through you to Councillor Haggard, I appreciate your comments. I must correct you. I did not use the word punishment in any way, shape, or form. I was sitting at the committee at whole meeting, and we had the four foremost experts on this subject, and as a decision maker, I just wanted their opinion. So I just wanted to make clear that the word punishment wasn't used by me. It was used by the people that were speaking to us that day, and we thank them for being here. So I mean, the simplicity of it is yes, we don't want anybody using drugs anywhere near our schools or playgrounds or arenas, anything like that. I know that the community of Campbell River had started such a proposal, and they had problems with it. So I support the idea for directing staff to look at the bylaw. I reserve the right to vote accordingly when the bylaw comes forward. That's it. But I just want to make sure that we were clear on my wording at the committee of the whole and my intention.
Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I really think it is important, the work that the CAT team is doing, along with all the other organizations in the community, to reduce the stigma, to bring drug use out of the dark corners of our society, whether it be physically behind a dumpster or whether it be more philosophically behind some type of professional activity. So I fail, though, to see how creating a bylaw that results in enforcement would help reduce the stigma. I think reducing the stigma is a valid objective. But I think there are better ways to do it. And the problem with having a bylaw is that a bylaw is only effective if it's enforceable. And there certainly would be no ability to enforce the proposed bylaw, except by the attendance of an individual in a uniform exercising apparent authority and essentially bullying the individual to stop their activity, which really does increase the stigma. Now, while I'm not in favor of the bylaw, I am in favor of further activity by this council to solve the problem. And one of those potential solutions, which is probably subject of another motion at another time, but I will briefly outline it now because it's important to know that there are other options available. And that is the use of what's called a peer-assisted crisis team. There's a number of different models all across North America that are being used. The one in BC is promoted by CMHA BC through funding from the provincial government mental health ministry. And it's directed towards having a non-uniform response, so non-threatening, and a voluntary acceptance of assistance. Right now, all responses are uniformed and they're involuntary, including EMS or ambulance, as it were. Those individuals are in uniform and they take custody of an individual to take them to the hospital, whether they want to go or not, for the purposes of psychiatric assessment. So I would suggest, and I was actually hoping that at the last Cal meeting there would be a presentation from CMHA with regards to the PAC team, but I would suggest that that's a better response than utilizing really just the response that we've always utilized for the last 50 years since the war on drugs started, 100 years since the war on drugs started, which has been ineffective, which is the uniformed bullying of individuals to go into hiding. Part of the reason that I would say that the voluntary response is more appropriate is because, contrary to popular opinion, drugs use is normal. It's a normalized thing in our society that's being kept in the shadows. The very statistics from the toxic drug crisis that says most deaths are males and they die at home leads to the only conclusion that these are individuals that are housed that are using, and the statistics indicate that most of them have jobs and are functioning members of society. And certainly before the war on drugs started in the 1920s, in California, cocaine and heroin were legally prescribed, and most individuals were functioning members of society that used drugs. So that doesn't suggest that I think we should all be drug users in society, but it does suggest that there is a better response to reduce the stigma and provide assistance to people in a context where they're willing to accept it and are more able to accept it. So I would be voting against this motion, but only because there's another way to achieve the same objective. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Thanks very much. I'd be voting against this motion, but only in the event that we can't discuss it, maybe come up with a friendly amendment. So I really appreciate the fact that there's an issue in our community with drug use and in areas that aren't appropriate. But I think we've tried enforcement from Interpol on down through all the various law enforcement agencies in the world, and the war on drugs just hasn't worked. Education and prevention and all those other avenues of approach, I think, work more effectively. One of the things I was hoping we could possibly do, because the concept which Councillor Patola just mentioned is one of them, we just had a discussion with the CAT team about possibly working with them and having a team of peers that could, sort of look after our community in certain areas and, educate people about the safe places where they can go if they need to use drugs. We can lobby the provincial government so that those places are open 24 hours a day instead of closing at midnight as they do currently. So I think there's a few solutions. What I was hoping we could do, if Councillor Haggard is okay with this, is just amend the wording slightly so that it would be to direct staff to present potential solutions for the use of illicit drugs in public spaces. And those potential solutions could include bylaws, it could include the PAC team, it could include lobbying the provincial government. There's a number of ways that perhaps our staff could find have been done in other communities that could work. So that was one comment I had. Thank you.
Thanks. If I could take that even back a step more, because I was going to propose an amendment as well to rather than direct staff to draft a bylaw, because I think we haven't had full enough conversation yet about what we would like to see included in that bylaw, if we do determine that that's the route, but rather that we direct staff first to explore the implications at a community level of decriminalization, because we haven't done that yet, and then present specific recommendations to keep our public spaces safe and free from drug use, I think is what we would like to get to at the end of the day. So I'm wondering if, it's not really, it's a bit of an amendment. It's really almost a new motion. So I don't want to present it as an amendment, because it really is different. But I just want to say that, in listening specifically to what Councillor Haggard has read out here, I think that for the most part, we can probably all largely agree. The intent here, it sounds to me, is that we want to make sure that our playgrounds and our parks and our public spaces that we all value so much in this community are safe. That, as much as we don't want to create, unsafe at-home drug use where people feel stigma and shame, and so that they have to end up at home in an unsafe way where they're putting themselves at risk. At the same time, we also don't want to have our children at the playground running into needles. There's a balance here, and I think that this whole council can recognize that balance and recognize the sensitivity that comes with both sides. And I know that we have a council who's largely engaged in this sector and wants to find creative solutions. I think that my concern at the end of the day is if we did go with a bylaw route, possibly what those interactions would look like when there was a report of somebody using drugs in a public setting. How would that be handled? And those would be challenging situations for our bylaw officers to deal with. So I think that we're trying to achieve the same thing here, and a bylaw route may or may not be the right way to get there, or it might be a part of the way to get there. So I think I'll maybe go to Councillor Haggard. I'm not sure if you would like amendments to be made, or if we want to vote on it as it's been presented. So I'll just go to you.
See, I looked at it differently, not as an enforcement, as an educational and relationship building process between bylaw and people that may be using substances in our playgrounds around where our children congregate. I didn't want it to be discourage anybody or give anybody stigma. I want it to be build relationships. We may not want services today, but you know what? I know that person can refer me to services when I'm ready. That's somebody that I can go to. It's somebody that can refer me to places in the community. So that's the way I was looking at it, not as an enforcement. I wanted a relationship building, but it gives our bylaw department a tool that can actually approach people now and say, look, did you know the OP Center is down the street here? Maybe you should go there, or let's do this, or do you need a place to stay? That was my intention here. So I'm happy to take that off the table and go to your motion. I think that might be better instead of an amendment.
It's totally up to you. Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Mealy and then Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, no, it's a touchy subject. And I'm not the foremost, not even on this council. There's people that have way more information than I do, and that's why when we had the committee of the whole, I wanted to get as much information. This is exactly why I like to second motions that I don't necessarily agree with, so we can have these discussions and work it out. So I really appreciate that. I think I'd like to think we're on the same page. Is just we're trying to balance. Public safety and, like you said, the stigma of people who can't just get off the drugs and they can't support themselves properly. But there's still people within our community that need help. They're just human beings as well. And so, like I said, that's why I like to second motions that I don't necessarily agree with, but just at least have that conversation. And from what I've heard, I would much rather definitely support either Councillor Patola or the mayor's thoughts on that.
Thank you. Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Councillor Haggard, I just want to say thank you for raising this issue. And I am very pleased to see that brought forward a discussion that has arrived at a motion that I think it seems like we're all generally in support of, which is great. And so I hope it doesn't feel like we're opposed to the original motion necessarily, but more so just discussing, I think, the best path forward. And I think that we're there. So thank you.
Councillor Solda.
Just a quick one. I just remember when the smoking ban came into effect and how people were so upset and so angry. You're taking away our rights and everything like that. I was glad because, I mean, smokers right into your face and that. But the whole thing is, when I'm looking back on newspaper reports just now about other communities going to the ban and how they say people are not feeling safe in their community when somebody is doing drugs and that, and that's a concern of theirs. And so I like the idea of a report or something like that, what you've put into plan here. And I don't know, it's a really hard one to call because the drugs in beaches and parks and that, I mean, we always smell it anyways, so what the heck, where we're going with that. It's true. My neighbor, so.
Thank you. And I just want to further note that I think when I hear Councillor Haggard talk about how she envisions this working, to me, that is the peer assisted response team. And so I think that we, again, are talking about the same thing, just maybe a different approach to get there. So since we do have the motion on the floor moved and seconded, I am going to call the question on the motion. And if it is defeated, then I will put forward a different motion. I think it's just too different to move forward with an amendment. So on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion defeated. And so I will move that we direct staff to prepare a report exploring the community implications of decriminalization and options to keep our public spaces safe for use of all community members. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Further discussion? Seeing none, on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Item number 15 on our agenda, we had a notice of motion for a council meeting leave policy. And Councillor Patola, I did just want to clarify if you wanted to read that notice of motion today or if it was just to be included on the agenda to come forward in full at the next meeting.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. I did intend to have it on the agenda today, but I note that it's not attached. So nobody on council or in the community had an opportunity to read it. I submitted it prior to the deadline, so I was hoping it would be included for discussion today. But given that there's now 18 items under new business, perhaps it would be most appropriate, because I kind of anticipated it would be referred to the cow, if we just refer it to cow.
I would make a motion to refer it to our next committee of the whole meeting. So there's a seconder, seconded by Councillor Douglas. Okay, on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thanks. And I think that's a great place for discussion on it. Item number 16, we have a notice of motion from Councillor Douglas. Did you want to make a motion or just note the motion for inclusion on our next agenda?
Well, I really wanted to tell a story.
Go ahead and tell a story. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah. So, as many of you know, I worked as a paramedic for my career and retired a number of years ago. So, one of my concerns over the years has been the level of ambulance service that we're provided with in the Alberni Valley. And as many of you know, the ambulance service at one time was provided by the fire department and then taken over by the BC government. And that's something I've supported my entire career, that they did that to achieve uniformity and efficiency and equally good training throughout the province to all the communities. So this morning I was out at a local establishment and an individual, an elderly person around in their mid-70s collapsed in front of me. And I was able to catch them, and they did fall to the ground and were unconscious for a short period of time, nauseated, pale, showing all the signs of a potential neurological event. and called for an ambulance. And the ambulance was, we waited probably 20 minutes before I called back again and was told that the ambulance had been diverted to a higher priority call and that the nearest ambulance was coming from the Cameron Lake area. So presumably it came from Qualicum and was en route. And at that point, I was about a 5-minute drive from the hospital. The person in question was able to take a few short steps. This person deserved a stretcher. They deserved good patient care, and they didn't get it. They got to sit in the front of my vehicle, sitting up and vomiting into their lap, and got them up to the emergency and fortunately got them to the proper place. But they should have gotten there in a much better fashion. And I know we've had instances of this over the past year. Some have resulted in fatalities in our community when ambulances were coming from outside the community. This has nothing to do with the closure of the road. It's an ongoing situation that we have in our community where we get a decreased level of input from the province to our community compared to other communities in terms of ambulance service, the numbers of ambulances, and in terms of ambulance training. There are communities on this island that have higher levels of training, and we haven't got there yet. And we still have gaps in how many ambulances are available. They have made some improvements, but they need to do more. So I wanted to tell that story, and I'd like to follow it up with a notice of motion for the next council meeting, probably involving a letter to BC Ambulance Service and the Ministry of Health, and then of course in September to UBCM. That's my story. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas, and thank you for your good work today. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. This is an issue that's been ongoing in our community for far too long, and I think we all have stories of things that we have witnessed where somebody has been waiting on an ambulance and there has not been adequate support. So thank you for bringing that forward. Item number 17, we have Rainbow Gardens. Councillor Solda.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'm just wondering when the report for Rainbow Gardens Park, on the park, is going to be brought forward so we can move and do something.
Through the chair, sorry, I wasn't aware we were waiting on a report for Rainbow Gardens. I can look into that. I do have some information on it, but not in a prepared format for a report.
Thank you. We made a request for a report when I think there were letters that came forward about the removal of the small park. So we made a request just to look at what options and costs would be to replace a park in the Rainbow Gardens, in the Westport area, not Rainbow Gardens specifically, just as a result of 3 playgrounds having been lost in the last 9 years in that area.
Thank you. I'll look into it and I'll forward up.
Thank you. Thanks. And item number 18, Councillor Dame, we have a motion or notice of motion for letter of support for an alternative highway or route.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Douglas mentioned earlier, I think that it's pretty clear due to recent events brought this to the forefront that we need another route out of town. And so I would just like to make a notice of motion that I guess I would read the notice of motion. Is that okay? My notice of motion is that council directs staff to write a letter on behalf of council urging the government of Canada and the province of BC to take immediate action in securing a permanent second access road into the city of Port Alberni.
Thank you. So that will appear on our next agenda. And lastly, I wanted to add my own notice of motion as well, which I did not state at the beginning of the meeting, but it is a notice of motion for the next meeting, so that's okay. And that is just that council directs staff to prepare a tree removal and replacement policy for consideration. And that's all we have for today, unless anyone else has any other notices of motion they'd like to note for the future. I'm not sure if we've had enough yet today. So, okay, Councillor Patola.
I don't have another notice of motion. I have a brilliant idea, in my humble opinion, that may accompany the letter requesting a secondary route out of the valley. I know that people focus on existing roadways that are currently the property of Mosaic, but I also know that there's $18 million in the Island Corridor Fund, and that every time I drive around Cameron Lake to get here, I think, why aren't I just going along the other side of the lake? And it's a valid route that would provide one-way traffic and an alternate route along an existing rail bed. So where there's an opportunity to make suggestions for upper levels of government to consider, that would be one that I would request including.
Thank you. That will be discussed further at our next meeting. Okay, we will move to question period. So this is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of council on decisions or recommendations made during the course of the meeting. A maximum of three questions will be permitted per speaker. Would anybody like to come forward today? Come on forward. And if you don't mind just stating your name when you get to the front and turn the mic on until it turns red.
In this meeting, do I have the right to ask a question about the silencing of public input from this meeting?
Are you able to start with your name, please?
Yeah, my name is Desmond Stevens.
Thank you.
3835 Kehoe Drive. I'll ask the question again. In this meeting, do I have a right to ask a question about the silencing of public input from this meeting? Yes or no?
Yes, absolutely. You can ask your questions right
Good.
now.
Okay, I have two other questions. So, Madam Mayor, since you were absent during the discussion and voting of a motion that ended public input at these meetings, would you like an opportunity now to tell the voters of Port Alberni if you favor silencing public input during these meetings?
I don't think I was absent. This was discussed at several meetings, so I think I've made my support for our new procedures bylaw as a whole quite clear. I may have been not at the meeting where the actual policy itself was passed. However, I spoke in support of the policy as a whole at multiple meetings leading up to it, and I would completely disagree with your classification that it is silencing of input. We've actually increased the amount of input that we allow at meetings, moving it at our committee of the whole meetings, extending the amount of time, and then additionally adding more speakers allowed. So
I'll make sure to bring tape next time I'm in the meetings to silence my mouth. Madam Mayor, regarding your previous comments in the proposed boundary extension area discussion, are you suggesting the council bears no responsibility for the percentage of property taxes in Port Alberni, but rather are you using the value of property as a sole reason for our very high taxes here in Port Alberni?
I'm not clear on what you're asking.
I'll ask the same thing again because I'm not going to water down the question. So here's the question again. Regarding your previous comments in the proposed boundary extension area discussion, are you suggesting that you and council bear no responsibility for the percentage of property taxes in Port Alberni, but rather you are using the value of property as a sole reason for our very high taxes in Port Alberni?
I'm not clear on what you mean by the percentage of.
Madam Mayor, you had the gall
Okay,
of
no.
suggesting.
Sorry, I'm asking you to clarify so that I am able to answer your question.
And I'm trying to. You had the gall of suggesting that our property taxes are okay here because Vancouver property taxes are in comparison to ours. You use that comparison to suggest that our property.
I did not use any comparison to Vancouver property taxes, and I did not suggest in any way that our property taxes are okay or not okay here. Rather, what I said is that our property taxes are too high comparative to the regional areas of the Alberni Valley. So that's our property taxes are too high compared to Beaver Creek, who has the benefit of all of our services. That was my comment. That's a larger conversation, something I believe strongly in, that the City of Port Alberni taxpayers do take on the vast majority of costs. However, those services are available to everyone who lives in the Alberni Valley. There is not an equitable split in those costs. Certainly not suggesting our property taxes are okay compared to Vancouver. I did not mention Vancouver or any other communities outside of the Alberni Valley. So you're making a lot of assumptions and putting words in my mouth, which is just not at all what I said. So I think we have Councillor Patola had his hand up and Councillor Mealy possibly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just having difficulty understanding the question myself and was wondering if Mr. Stevens, who's now left the room, could tell us which previous comments you were referring to, but apparently it's not necessary any longer.
Thank you. I have, sorry, Wendy at the back first.
Thank you. Wendy Kerr, Port Alberni resident, 63 and a half years, 42 years at the lovely hospital, a couple years as a counselor. Okay, so here's my story. I'd like to respond to the medical and possibly the ambulance crisis. I'd like to talk about drugs, but I only get 3 minutes, right? So my concern, or my question, is that, I'm one of those people, and I told you last time I was here that I was not willing to take the experimental jab that we call the COVID vaccine. I did not take it. I did not die like my sister did. I didn't die like my stepsister did, and I don't get to work anymore. So, and I've been told I should get a new hobby. Thought I'd take on gardening, watered the hell out of everything, got my $450 water bill the other day, sat home, looked at my retirement check and cried. I think I want to move somewhere. Maybe I could go someplace where I can actually legally work at my profession that actually I just finished 3 years ago because I went back to school. Everybody took my money, encouraged me, and now I can no longer work in my province. And truly do not understand why I could go to another province and utilize my skills that I worked very hard to develop. I don't know why. And I'd like someone in this group to ask that question of the Minister of Health, Mr. Trudeau, Bonnie Henry, because if I was safe to work and assist our hospital a few years ago with my mask on, I do not understand why I could not be there today. Unfortunately, Dr. Lambiot, he talked about the doctors and the nurses and et cetera. So I'm an et cetera. I'm really not good enough to be a doctor or nurse. But I worked really hard at that hospital. When they needed me, I worked in intensive care, I worked in psychiatry, I worked in acute care, and residential West Haven care. So basically what I'm asking to do today of you folks here that do such a great job taking care of our community, and I know that you think that our health is so important, and I just think that if our health this is truly an emergency, then let's get all of our people back to the table. And I can't do this myself. I have written every politician that I've known, and Gord Johns wrote me back, and I'm not getting any help. And I want to work. I loved my job. I am very good, and I took care of your parents, your mom, your dad, and now I can't work. Now I'm starving to death, and now I'm looking to move to another province. So I'd like you folks, someone here possibly, to make a motion that maybe we could write a few letters out asking why we can't let our people that chose not to take their experimental jab and let them come back to work. And that would be my request, that you write a letter asking if that could happen, and if not, why not? And my other question is that if you don't think that you can support this motion, I'd like to know why not. And I thank you very much for your time today. Thank you. I know you've had a long meeting.
Thank you, Wendy. And I will just say that regardless of, because the vaccine is obviously not a municipal issue specifically, but I will just say that when I made a motion to have a task force, I do think that that task force needs to explore every option to get medical professionals into our community. And one thing that does need to be looked at is that question being asked to the province. So that needs to form part of the task force. That's not a council endorsed opinion, but I don't think that it needs to be. A task force to look at medical professionals into our community needs to look at all options to get medical professionals working in our community. That's not for us to decide, but it is for us to ask the questions and ensure that anyone who can be working safely should be working safely. Come on forward, Monica.
Thank you very much, Mayor and councillors. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Well, global warming is happening, and fire is happening here in Port Alberni. And that's the reason I want to be here and just talk about having a broader picture. And that is that Port Alberni doesn't get stuck. And I'm very happy to hear that you discussed about the second route. But if we really think about it, if our train would have been working, it would have been going now every day, help Port Alberni with teachers and nurses that were living on the other side, and they could have come. The graduation could have been here because the train could have come and gone because it was on the other side. And we don't know where it's going to be fire. And the earth is going to get warmer and warmer, and we are going to get worse and worse fires. So we have to be prepared. How are we going to do this? None of these are better than the other. So roads are important, trains are important, aviation is important. I was thinking about Coulson's and wonderful water bombers. I would like to see them again start building the water bombers that they had. I remember when I came here to Canada, 1975, and I saw them, and they are awesome machines. And instead of having small helicopters with little tiny buckets, it does nothing. And also we have to focus on the port. So it's all four areas are equally important, and none of them are more important than the others. So another thing, when I was up here, I asked last time, where is the emergency office? I didn't get an answer. Now, in the Port Alberni newspaper, it was very, very clear that everybody was countering around where to get their supply. So what I feel we need to focus on is we have an emergency office. I don't really care where it is. We can all think about a specific place. And that emergency office will focus on everything, if it is supply or health or anything that will come up with people that are stuck wherever they are, and the emergency office will then take it and in different areas so that it goes forward, so that we won't be hemmed in, so we can't go anywhere. So that was my 2 bits about global warming and the fire. And I had one more thing that came in my mind, and that was about your story. And I was thinking, in North Vancouver, where I come from, we started to put fabricators, thank you very much, into recreation centers, libraries, stores, So we all in the community knew where exactly they are. They are fantastic, very easy to use, and it can help a person very fast. So I'm wondering, does Port Alberni have any of them on the site?
Yes, we do. So
Oh, you do?
our library has the multiplex. I know the golf course has one out there. A number of other private businesses do have them as well. And
Okay.
then, possibly other community rec centers.
Okay.
We think there's one at the Harbor Key. So there are several throughout the community.
Okay,
Yes, we're all
okay.
guessing right now. There's one here, thank you. We're not going to forget
Oh,
City
one in
Hall.
City
People are
Hall,
pointing in the
okay.
back. There is one at City Hall.
Maybe there should be some kind of map so that people are aware.
A map is a great idea.
Okay.
I wonder if there is one.
So that we all in the city, in the community know where they exist. So if somebody collapses in Save on Food, where do I go? Is it one in Shoppers Drug Mart or, where is the closest? I don't know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica. Are there any other members of the public who would like to ask a question today? Okay,
Sorry,
Councillor
Madam Mayor, I
Mealy.
think the one question that was missed was where was the Emergency Operations Center, which is just behind us in the basement, if I'm not correct still, it's still in the basement of the regional district office. So whenever there's a disaster, and that comes forward whenever, I mean, it's come from times from the tsunami, but anytime there's a major disaster, a major issue, the Emergency Operations Center is opened. The staff there are on hand, as well as city staff, and there's part from the policy group as well. One of the councillors or the mayor will be there at a time of a huge disaster, especially a earthquake or tsunami. So, but as of today, I believe it was just closed today. So from the date of the fire until today, the Emergency Operations Center actually was open in the basement of the regional district office next door.
I went to the district and wanted them to call me back. Never heard anything, and still today I haven't.
Well, you just phone the city and we'll take care of that. No, nothing against the regional district, but that's where it is, miss.
But also in the newspaper, there could have been a specific address because I went to the district and I asked them and they said they will call me back. Never did.
Thank you, Monica. Okay, would somebody like to move adjournment of our meeting? Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Botola. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.